The story begins with a wisteria stands in a void, haunted by a muttered voice calling something a lie, the memory of a person who should only exist in the past lingering in her mind. She questions the cruel reality before her. Why the man she loves now stands beside her younger sister as a husband. The narrative rewinds 7 years to a pivotal introduction. A young, orphaned wisteria stands before her adoptive parents, the Earl and Countess Rafferty, and her new younger sister, Rosalie. The Earl prepares them to meet the son of the prestigious ruining house, warning the girls to maintain perfect manners. A young Bright enters the room, apologizing for his delay. Wisteria instantly finds herself captivated by him. Ignoring social distance, Bright strides directly to Wisteria and peers intensely into her face, startling the adults. He ignores the others, fixating entirely on her eyes, declaring their color rare and beautiful, a moment that fundamentally shifts Wisteria's world. 13 years elapse. At a high society tea party hosted by the Queen, a 17-year-old Rosalie throws a tantrum over a missing cake, displaying a lack of decency that draws the scorn of the other nobles. Wisteria, now 20, attempts to calm her sister, urging modesty. The surrounding aristocrats whisper about Rosalie's insidious nature, contrasting it with Wisteria's composure. Rosalie switches seamlessly to a fawning, sugary tone, addressing Wisteria as Wis Ne-sama, while Wisteria reflects on her generally favorable life as an adoptee in the Rafferty house. Back at the estate, Wisteria discusses her research into the land before dawn, a taboo subject that worries her family. She explains that in their martial country, magic users are rare, yet she feels compelled to continue this investigation. Rosalie feigns support, reminding Wisteria that she begged for this path herself. Rosalie then shifts the topic to the upcoming night party, teasing Wisteria about a potential romantic encounter with that person. Wisteria attends the ball, though she feels out of place in the political hotspot for marriage proposals. Her attention snaps to the entrance as Bright, now 24 and the heir to the ruining dukedom, makes his grand entrance. He bypasses the crowd to stand beside Wisteria, greeting her as the goddess of the moon, and causing her to flush crimson. He playfully grabs her hand, teasing her about the difference in enthusiasm between her and Rosalie. Wisteria feels the weight of his status as a future duke, believing him to be an existence she cannot easily touch, yet she yearns for a qualification that would make her worthy of him. The surrounding nobles gossip viciously, labeling Wisteria a witch-like woman, due to her research and questioning why the living jewel of ruining stands with an adopted child. Bright ignores the slander, asking Wisteria for the honor of the first dance and praising her eyes once more. As they dance, Wisteria realizes she loves him, but fails to voice it before a man named Kenneth interrupts. Kenneth delivers a backhanded compliment, praising Wisteria while mocking Bright as ruining's failure for his inability to use magic. Suddenly, the chandelier above them shears from the ceiling. Bright dives to shield Wisteria with his body, but she reacts with supernatural speed, casting a suction spell that diverts the falling debris and flames away from them. Bright stares at her, awestruck by her power. Later, at the Magic Research Laboratory, Wisteria and her colleague Benjamin analyze a sample of miasma from the land before dawn. The dark substance reacts violently inside the test tube, confirming that the miasma, poisonous magic elements, has thickened significantly. Benjamin explains that monsters in that land have adapted to this miasma, and its strengthening signals a leakage into their world. Wisteria hopes that solving this mystery will bring honor to her name and repay her debt to the Raffertys, potentially even helping Bright acquire magic. However, Benjamin issues a grave warning. If the miasma thickens too much, a guardian will be selected to travel to the land before dawn to stabilize it. He clarifies that this guardian is effectively a human sacrifice who never returns. Wisteria walks through town and notices the popular cake shop Rosalie mentioned. She freezes upon seeing Bright and Rosalie sitting together on the terrace. Bright smiles gently, praising Rosalie's red hair, and laughs heartily at her blunt comments. Witnessing this intimacy, Wisteria turns away, her chest tightening with the realization that she must suppress her feelings for the sake of her adorable, precious sister. She returns to the Rafferty estate, resolving to abandon her desire for Bright. Her stepfather summons her to meet with personnel from the Magic Administration Institute. The officials deliver a devastating decree. The lordship's daughter, Rosalie Bettina, has been selected to serve as the guardian of the land before dawn. The ruining family freezes in horror as a royal messenger delivers the grim decree. Rosalie Bettina has been selected as the guardian for the land before dawn. The messenger explains the dire necessity of the role, stating that a guardian must depart immediately to stabilize the abnormally concentrated miasma before it overflows into their world and causes catastrophic calamities. He warns that the air in that land is deathly poisonous. The parents turn desperately to Wisteria, asking if she knows anything about this, but she remains silent, fully aware that the mission implies a journey of no return. Realization strikes the family that this appointment is a sacrifice, a death sentence from the royal family. The father protests violently, refusing to send Rosalie to such a dangerous place to die. However, the messenger coldly asserts they have no right to veto the decision and demands discretion before departing. The scene shifts to Wisteria, who clutches her chest as she recalls the true dread of the miasma. She remembers an incident years prior at an evening party where a guest recklessly unleashed magic indoors. The spell created a volatile vortex that shattered the calm and released the toxic substance. Wisteria regained consciousness days later to learn that while others suffered serious illness or death from the exposure, she miraculously exhibited a complete resistance to the poison with no side effects. Despite her unique resistance, she knows that constant exposure in the land before dawn would still prove fatal. She reviews the guardian requirements: a healthy, unmarried woman between early teens and late 20s with high-level magic capability. A researcher confirms the accurate readings of the miasma density, and Wisteria notes that other ladies of higher rank also possess the same qualifications as Rosalie. A dark thought briefly crosses Wisteria's mind, imagining a world without Rosalie, but she immediately rejects the foolish notion, chiding herself for not being the compassionate older sister she strives to be. She returns to the main hall where her distraught parents and Bright, her sister's fiancé, wait. They desperately ask if her investigation yielded any way to save Rosalie, but Wisteria apologizes, having found no easy solution. The father suddenly recalls Wisteria's unique resistance to miasma. He halts his weeping and suggests that because the danger lies in the miasma, Wisteria should go in Rosalie's place. Before the father can finish condemning Wisteria, Bright slams the door, shouting for Lord Rafferty to pull himself together and forget the suggestion. Bright demands Rosalie's location and rushes to the second floor. He bows to Wisteria, apologizing for his rudeness, and vows to stake his family name on overturning the Magic Administration Institute's absurd notice. Wisteria acknowledges that Rosalie suffers the most, listening as her sister screams for everyone to go away. Time passes, and a maid informs Wisteria that Bright has returned to see her. Wisteria recalls witnessing Bright holding a sobbing Rosalie, promising he would definitely not allow her to die. He used the heaviest form of love in his confession to Rosalie, leaving no doubt of his devotion. Wisteria remembers Bright praising her kindness and claiming that talking to her brought him peace. She suppresses her own heartbreak, admitting silently that she has always loved him too. Meanwhile, rumors spread that Bright is frantically visiting other noble houses, conducting interviews and causing a stir about the succession. Wisteria waits, dismissing the gossip. The maid urges Wisteria not to push herself but announces that Bright wishes to speak with both sisters together. Wisteria enters the parlor, noting how pale and exhausted Bright appears. Bright explains that he negotiated with the Magic Administration Institute. They agreed that if a qualified person voluntarily submits to be a replacement, it will be considered, but simply overturning the results is impossible as it would disrupt the system. He looks Wisteria in the eye and delivers the crushing demand: she must go to the land before dawn in Rosalie's place. He admits he has already investigated all other possible candidates. He reveals the depths of his desperation, having visited houses that owed them debts or harbored guilt, even resorting to blackmail, but to no avail. There is only Wisteria left. Wisteria accepts this request as cosmic punishment for her secret sins: her inability to bless the couple, her ingratitude toward her adoptive parents, and her shamefully coveting Bright. She realizes she subconsciously wished to tear them apart. Resigning herself to fate, she acknowledges that she meets the guardian requirements and agrees to his demand. She asks only that he inform the Institute and watch over Rosalie. Bright apologizes, looking pained that she had to volunteer instead of him forcing it sooner, but Wisteria smiles through the pain. She asks if there is anything he can do for her in return. She hesitates, calling it a stupid thing, but finally asks him to give her a hug just this once. He embraces her, and as tears stream down her face, she realizes that even in this cruel moment, her love for him remains. Later at the Magic Administration Institute, an official verifies her decision, questioning if she truly intends to become a replacement, knowing she will never return from the Deathland. She confirms her choice. Suddenly, a mysterious voice resonates in her head, declaring that it has had enough of boredom and will accompany her. She realizes the voice emanates from the treasure sword she is holding. The sword, Saltus, speaks her name, Wisteria Elaine, shocking the onlookers. The sword proclaims that the goddess of the moon has descended to be by its side. Wisteria, accepting her destiny, prays only that she may die peacefully. The land before dawn remains a desolate expanse known by many names: Hades, Purgatory, and the land where demons dwell, a place from which no soul ever returns. Inside a stone shelter, Wisteria Elaine wakes to the voice of Saltus, the holy sword chained near her bed. The sword mocks her, asking if she has grown senile, and reminds her that exactly 23 years have passed since their arrival. Wisteria acknowledges the milestone, noting that while she has now reached her 43rd year, her physical appearance remains supernaturally unchanged from the day she arrived. Saltus continues its verbal assault, calling her a splendid hag despite her youthful blooming buds, but Wisteria forcefully grabs the hilt, silencing the weapon. She asserts that the Earl's young daughter who came here prepared to die has long since perished, leaving only Wisteria Elaine, the guardian. Saltus insists on accompanying her, claiming it cannot feel at ease if she faces the great dragon tree alone. Wisteria agrees, claiming she has been corrupted by the sword's bad influence, and steps out of the shelter, leaping gracefully across the treacherous terrain. She traverses the colorless landscape where neither sun nor moon shines, realizing she has grown accustomed to this world devoid of light. Saltus recalls how Wisteria cried incessantly upon her arrival, clinging to the sword because she could not walk, a stark contrast to the callous survivor she has become. They arrive at the Great Dragon Tree, a massive biological entity that exhales miasma as part of its activity cycle. Wisteria observes that the miasma concentration appears stable. She recalls her first terrifying walk down the cold, dark road from the Magic Administration Institute's gate, believing she would be eaten by the monstrosity. Instead of devouring her, the tree trapped her within its roots. Following the routine established over decades, Saltus instructs her to touch the tree as if putting a child to sleep. Wisteria places her hand against the bark, enduring the stinging rush of miasma to adjust its flow. She reflects on the nature of guardians. The great dragon tree typically goes haywire when absorbing humans because it treats them as foreign objects difficult to digest. A guardian's purpose is to act as an indigestible presence that soothes the tree into slumber. Suddenly, the sky tears open, revealing a black gate identical to the one Wisteria saw 23 years ago connecting to her old world. A figure falls from the vortex, landing amidst the white flora beneath the tree. Wisteria stares in shock as the dust settles, revealing a human male. As he lifts his head, she freezes, recognizing the face of Bright. The man gasps her name, Elaine, but immediately shifts his demeanor, demanding to know if the Wisteria Elaine still retains her form. He lunges forward with incredible speed, shouting for her to hand over the holy sword Saltus. Wisteria realizes this man is not Bright as she casts a magic shield to block his sword strike. The impact reverberates, and the attacker recoils, shocked by the strength of her relaxation defensive spell. Wisteria effortlessly dominates the encounter, telling him to pipe down as he struggles to move against her magic. She notes his low resistance to the environment, surprised he hasn't already fallen asleep from the miasma exposure. The young man demands the sword again, refusing to banter with a witch, and questions if she truly bears the same face as Bright Lux Ruining. Wisteria lifts his chin with her hand, asserting that Saltus chooses its own master and that she is the one asking questions. She warns him that a normal human will die if they remain in the land before dawn for too long. Wisteria declares that the miasma is currently stable and dismisses his attempts to claim the sword, stating that even if he were acknowledged as master, it changes nothing in this place. She demands he leave immediately, confused as to why he would need Saltus. The young man finally identifies himself, revealing that Bright Lux Ruining is his father. He introduces himself as Lloyd Allen Ruining. Wisteria stares down at the young man, processing the revelation that this intruder, Lloyd Allen Ruining, is the son of Bright and her sister. She asks if his mother is Rosalie Bettina, but Lloyd dismisses the question, coldly stating that her name belongs to the past and asking what it matters. Wisteria feels the bitter irony of their child appearing before her, a living testament to the marriage and family she was excluded from. Lloyd sneers, remarking that he doesn't remember being related to a witch, and questions why she possesses the holy sword Saltus and why she opened the gate. Wisteria refuses to explain, curtly telling him it is none of his business and advising him to give up and go home. Lloyd, driven by arrogance, reaches for the sword, claiming that Saltis does not recognize her as a master. However, the toxic environment instantly overwhelms him. Wisteria shouts for him not to force himself, warning that resisting the spell under such heavy miasma risks his life. As Lloyd collapses, his consciousness fading, he desperately vows to bring the sword back. Wisteria catches him, struck by the intensity in his eyes, which mirrors a memory from 23 years ago. The narrative shifts to a flashback of Wisteria's childhood. Young Wisteria stands humiliated as other noble children smash a hair clip given to her by her mother, mocking her as just an adopted child, whose family status is beneath theirs. She holds back her tears, believing that as the older sister, she must not cry. Suddenly, a young Bright intervenes, furious on her behalf. He confronts the bullies, declaring he cannot forgive such cruelty, and turns to Wisteria with a gentle promise to buy her another clip. He wipes her tears, admitting he hates fighting but is willing to get angry for her sake. Wisteria marvels at his eyes, describing them as fierce, bright, and burning like golden flames. Back in the present, Lloyd wakes up inside Wisteria's shelter formed by the roots of the great dragon tree. He immediately becomes defensive, but Wisteria calms him, explaining that the miasma concentration here is thinner and safe for the moment. Lloyd studies her, confused that her appearance does not match a woman who should be 3 years older than his mother. He questions if she is truly Wisteria Elaine and how she has survived as a human for so long. Wisteria reveals she has a natural resistance to miasma. Saltis interrupts the conversation, warning Lloyd not to touch its scabbard with his gross hands and proclaiming itself the great holy sword and feared protector. Wisteria clarifies the mechanics of her existence. She is not immortal, but the massive accumulation of miasma in her body has caused her biological time to stop. She still requires sleep and food, and she recovers from injuries like a normal person, but she does not age. Wisteria urges Lloyd to return home immediately now that he has located the sword. She offers to send a return signal to reopen the gate. Lloyd refuses, revealing that Saltis does not recognize him as a master, and asserts that even Wisteria is only a temporary master born of the sword's compassion. He declares his intention to make the sword recognize him as its true master. Saltis scoffs at the brat, explaining its origins as a weapon extracted from a demon by a demigod hero of the mythical age. It possesses a distinct ego and chooses its own master, having rejected countless heroes and swordsmen over the centuries. Lloyd remains stubborn, refusing to back down or accept his current inadequacy. He claims that while he may be beneath Wisteria's level now, he does not intend to stay that way. Lloyd apologizes for his earlier violence and thanks her for saving him, though he admits he cannot repay her yet. He then casts a magic shield to demonstrate his capability. Wisteria observes the spell with interest, noting she has never seen magic that interferes with life rather than nature. She realizes that in her isolation, the outside world has invented new forms of magic. Lloyd deduces that Wisteria used transfer magic to bring him to the shelter and points out that if she can use such high-level ancient magic, she could wield even more powerful spells. He admits he was mistaken to think there was no one left to learn from, acknowledging her as a master of both magic and the sword. Lloyd issues a challenge. He will defeat Wisteria to prove his worth to Saltis. However, he adds a condition that catches her off guard. He demands that she take him as a disciple. He wishes to learn from her treasure trove of knowledge. He reveals that Saltis also ordered him to acquire a technique called Black Lightning. Wisteria tries to reject him, stating she cannot take care of a human in this death land. Lloyd shrewdly counters by saying he will simply wait outside in the life-threatening miasma until she accepts him. Realizing she cannot let Bright's son die, and seeing the same burning light in his determination that she once loved in his father, she relents. Lloyd bows, formally addressing her as Master Shirsho. Wisteria feels the time that had stopped for 23 years finally begin to move again. Wisteria sits opposite Roger Wales at a dining table, feeling physically imposing and self-conscious about her height. She picks at her food without an appetite, internalizing a comparison between her tall frame and her petite sister Rosalie, worrying that her stature makes it easy to look down on others. A dark thought crosses her mind as she wonders if Bright sees her through the same critical lens. The narrative shifts to the inception of this courtship, where Bright informs Wisteria that the Wales House, a merchant clan expanding its power, has proposed a marriage meeting. He explains that the adopted son, Roger, desires to make her his wife upon first sight. Wisteria dismisses the sudden proposal as shallow, believing it is merely due to her status as a beauty, but agrees to the meeting to prevent her family from worrying about her reputation. Bright gently offers her a way out, stating they can decline if she feels disinclined, but she resolves to endure the meeting. Roger Wales proves to be aggressive in his pursuit, asking permission to use her first name immediately and seating her in a garden for tea. He compliments her beauty, claiming she is an underrated jewel, and that he wishes to secure her before others notice her value. He bombards her with gifts, including jewelry and invitations to the opera, and acts with an over-the-top passion that Wisteria finds strange but potentially useful. She calculates that his intensity might help her extinguish her lingering, painful feelings for Bright, and considers accepting a political marriage to aid Roger's ambition of connecting with the aristocracy. However, the facade crumbles during a garden walk when Roger reveals his true merchant nature, describing their potential union as a huge profit, because she is currently cheap on the marriage market. He callously critiques her appearance, identifying her height and lack of fleshiness as flaws that intimidate men, reducing her to a valuable item with defects. Realizing he views her solely as a commodity to be acquired, Wisteria recognizes she cannot marry such a man and drafts a rejection letter, apologizing for the misunderstanding. In the present timeline within the Land Before Dawn, Wisteria struggles to reach an item on a high shelf in her root shelter. She stretches on her tiptoes, deciding against using levitation magic for such a trivial task. Saltus, the Holy Sword, observes her struggle and mocks her, commenting that she is smaller than he thought and that her physical ability is lacking. Wisteria retorts with a threat to bury the sword outside, but Saltus continues his analysis, noting that while others find her cold or intimidating, she is actually a soft touch, once observed closely. He argues that her appearance deceives people into thinking she is daunting, but she is far from cold. Wisteria feels a faint warmth spread in her chest as she remembers Bright's kindness, acknowledging that while the memory slightly hurts, it is a feeling she cannot easily discard. Lloyd examines the interior of the tree hollow, noting how the wooden sanctuary was carved bit by bit to transform a natural formation into a habitable home rather than a damp cave. He sits at a simple wooden table, observing the craftsmanship while his hostess, Wisteria, prepares a beverage in the background. Lloyd raises a wooden mug to his lips and swallows the contents, steeling himself for a harsh reaction, but finds it to be a piping hot medicinal tea brewed to neutralize miasma. Wisteria chastises him for his lack of caution, warning that while she cannot vouch for the taste, his safety is paramount, and she mocks his stoicism by suggesting he is rapidly turning into a fussing old woman. The conversation shifts to Lloyd's purpose, and he declares his intention to use the Holy Sword Saltus as proof for a marriage proposal. Wisteria momentarily misunderstands his request, visualizing a plant bulb due to a homophone, before the absurdity of the situation clarifies in her mind. Lloyd explains that he intends to propose to the third princess, Irene Cheryl Marcial, and requires the sword to silence the opposition that desires her highness and questions the ruining house. Recognizing his resolve to come this far, Wisteria concedes to a compromise. She agrees to let him stay for a fixed period to learn magic and miasma reflection, provided he maintains the miasma-absorbing tool, though she doubts he can master Black Lightning within half a year. Wisteria introduces herself by her true name, Elaine, instructing him to drop the formalities. Saltus, the Holy Sword, manifests its consciousness to interject, expressing skepticism about Lloyd's ability to master the dark arts so quickly. The sword reveals that Lloyd's resistance to miasma is the sole reason the Magic Administration Institute selected him as a guardian candidate to replace a woman named Rosalie. Saltus accuses the administration of treating guardians as disposable replacements, questioning why Lloyd was chosen to bear the burden. Lloyd remains impassive, inciting the sword's irritation at his lack of emotional response to being used. As night falls, Wisteria escorts Lloyd to a storage room, apologizing that he must use it as his sleeping quarters until she cleans it further. Lloyd formally vows never to step foot into her bedroom, a declaration Wisteria finds ludicrously unnecessary given that she is 43 years old and sees herself as an old hag rather than a romantic temptation. She dismisses his concern with a wave of her hand, leaving him to retire for the night. Alone, Lloyd reflects on her self-deprecation, noting that she truly does not view him as a man, nor herself as a woman, because she has ceased to see herself as a normal human. Saltus interrupts Lloyd's thoughts, manifesting again to issue a stern warning. The sword commands Lloyd to keep his word and remain solely Elaine's disciple, forbidding him from laying a hand on her even in jest. Saltus describes Elaine as a pitiful woman, who offered herself for the sake of a maladroit love, characterizing her as foolish and sad. Lloyd counters the sword's pity, arguing that a woman who has survived alone in a miasma-filled land while retaining her sanity deserves awe, not scorn. He asserts that her survival is a feat unlike any hero's and suggests the sword's warnings are better served elsewhere. The mention of maladroit love triggers a painful memory for Lloyd. The narrative shifts to a flashback where Lloyd, known as Viscount Jennys, stands on a training ground surrounded by whispering knights. He has just dominated a sparring match against an apprentice named Marsh, who breathes heavily from the exertion. Marsh mutters insults about Lloyd being a noble who relies on his lineage rather than skill, prompting Lloyd to glare coldly and challenge the apprentice to let the sword do the talking if he has grievances. Edwin Hugh Balin, a frivolous noble, approaches the brooding Lloyd, ignoring the tension to gossip about Lloyd's personal life. Edwin asks if Lloyd is heartbroken over his recent split with Lady Esther, treating the breakup as mere entertainment. Lloyd remains silent, his mind drifting to the moment Esther left him. In his memory, Esther weeps, confessing that while he is the ideal lover who fulfills every request, he lacks a human heart. She cries that she can never possess his soul and curses him, declaring that he will never know true love for the rest of his life. The memory of her tearful rejection haunts him, reinforcing his belief that he is emotionally hollow. The flashback is interrupted as a messenger bangs frantically on the door, shouting for Viscount Jennys to come immediately. Edwin Hugh Balin introduces Lloyd to a crowd of onlookers, presenting him as the greatest masterpiece of the ruining house and the best sword mage in Martial. A muscular man steps forward, identifying himself as Herman Ob Arturo, a student from the northern military country of Falsies. Herman sneers at the local knights, expressing his disappointment in Marshall's reliance on magic, and challenges Lloyd to about to test his reputed undefeated record against demons. Lloyd accepts the challenge silently, and as Herman charges with his blade, Lloyd unleashes a devastating burst of sword magic that engulfs his opponent in a blinding pillar of light. The overwhelming force shatters Herman's confidence, forcing him to yield immediately while trembling on the ground. Edwin remarks on Lloyd's bored expression, noting that his terrifying strength is why the Crown Prince refers to him as the monster of ruining. Lloyd returns to the opulent ruining residence, where a young woman named Patricia rushes down the grand staircase to greet him. She embraces him with excessive affection, squealing in delight, prompting Lloyd to catch her and chide her for running. He carries her up the stairs like a child, explaining that he will soon depart for a demon subjugation expedition and must retire to his room. Patricia clings to him, refusing to let go, while Lloyd's brother, Louis, watches the scene from a doorway. Louis comments on the scene, noting that while their fiancé arrangement isn't bad, Patricia's obsession is intense for a 17-year-old. Louis shifts the conversation to business, asking Lloyd about a spell that allows magic elements to be absorbed and released, lamenting that he cannot master it despite his efforts. Lloyd dismisses the difficulty, stating it has nothing to do with age, leaving Louis despondent over the gap in their natural talents. Their father, the patriarch of the ruining house, appears and coldly confronts Lloyd about the duel with Herman. He sternly reprimands Lloyd, ordering him to refrain from using magic except in extraordinary circumstances, viewing the use of magic against a human noble as a narrow-minded error. Lloyd accepts the scolding impassively, privately noting that his father's disdain stems from his own inability to use magic. Seeking respite, Lloyd visits the magic research laboratory to meet with Director Labra, the man who taught him magic. Labra asks about the match with Arturo, but Lloyd brushes it off as a simple reinforcement spell unworthy of note. The conversation turns to the history of the land before dawn and the miasma, prompting Lloyd to ask about the records regarding Wisteria Elaine. Labra reveals that Wisteria was not the evil woman history paints her to be. She was a gentle, wise, and strong person who took the place of another girl selected as a guardian candidate. He clarifies that her only recorded crime was the theft of the holy sword Saltus, a charge that led to her banishment. Labra warns Lloyd never to mention Wisteria in front of his mother, Rosalie, whose memories became muddled from the trauma of her adopted sister's exile. The narrative shifts to the Imperial Jousting Championship, where Lloyd dominates the competition and is hailed as the champion. He stands before Her Highness, Irene Cheryl Martial, the White Rose of the palace, to receive his reward. Unlike others who look at him with fear or adoration, the princess regards him with challenging, gauging eyes. Later, at a social gathering, Lloyd approaches the princess, ignoring the whispers of the aristocracy. Irene demands that Lloyd prove his worth not with ambiguous words, but with a definite demonstration of passion. Lloyd understands her implied command, she desires the holy sword Saltus as a testament to the sublime white rose. Lloyd prepares for his unauthorized departure to the land before dawn, a place from which no guardian has ever returned. Back in the laboratory, Labra provides Lloyd with ornaments designed to absorb miasma, warning that they have limits and will only suffice for the journey there and back. Before Lloyd leaves, Labra makes a heavy request regarding Wisteria. He acknowledges that demons in that land can mimic human forms and asks Lloyd to confirm Wisteria's fate. If Lloyd finds something in the shape of Wisteria that has been sullied and turned into a monster, Labra pleads for him to let her rest, effectively asking Lloyd to kill her to preserve her dignity. Lloyd agrees to the grim task, leaving Labra to hope that she can at least rest in peace. Alone, Lloyd reflects on Labra's insistence that Wisteria was never an evil woman, carrying the weight of this revelation as he sets out. Wisteria awakens in the wooden hollow, touching her forehead as she processes that the events of the previous day were not a dream. She observes the morning light filtering into the room and glances at the bedside table where a crystal lamp sits. Turning her gaze, she sees Lloyd sleeping soundly, his face peaceful in slumber. She self-consciously touches her own hair, lamenting her disheveled appearance as a dust-covered maiden compared to his sleeping modesty. Quietly, she moves to a wooden rack to retrieve clothes, noting that these garments are reserved for the day of the ceremony and should not be worn yet. As she attempts to prepare while he sleeps, Lloyd suddenly stands behind her, fully awake and shirtless, asking what she is doing. Wisteria recoils, mentally calling him a disrespectful lout and a shameless man for his state of undress. Lloyd greets her as "Master," and casually offers to take a bath if his hygiene bothers her, explaining that he is accustomed to marching in unhygienic military environments. Wisteria insists on the bath and a change of clothes, feeling a wave of awkwardness at the prospect of eating with another person after her long isolation. She flushes, denying her flustered state when Lloyd questions her reaction and asserts her role as his caretaker. Later, Wisteria measures Lloyd for new clothes, wrapping a tape measure around his torso. She remarks that he is well built, noting the width of his shoulders despite his slender appearance in clothes. Lloyd questions if she intends to sew the clothes herself, prompting Wisteria to summon assistance. Small, spherical demons with wings and glasses materialize, surrounding Lloyd. Lloyd remains calm, identifying them as demons that feed on miasma. Wisteria explains that these harmless creatures perform tasks like sewing in exchange for the miasma circulating within a body, likening the substance to honey for bees. As the demons swarm him, Lloyd suddenly seizes Wisteria, pinning her against the table to demonstrate her lack of defense. He warns her that she is full of openings, referencing his warning from the previous night. Wisteria counters that he underestimates her. While her physical abilities are average, she utilizes magic derived from miasma. She commands the holy sword Saltus to stand down as Lloyd grimaces in pain, biting his lip to suppress the effects of the miasma interaction. Wisteria forbids him from injuring his own body and demands he listen to her as his master. Wisteria begins her instruction, explaining that Lloyd must learn two skills to survive outside: reflection and levitation. Reflection involves stretching a thin membrane of magic over the body to reduce miasma penetration. Lloyd asks about her patrol duties, and she reveals she observes the Great Dragon Tree, though its activity cycle remains unknown. When Lloyd challenges her to demonstrate her magic, Wisteria obliges by lighting a fire. She creates a purple flame in her hand, explaining that while miasma and magic elements appear similar, they function differently. She warns that this is another world, and standard magic will be hindered here. Lloyd inquires if magical research in the outside world has evolved regarding sense over the last 23 years. Wisteria confirms that no new theories have surfaced, realizing Lloyd's father still cannot use magic. She then illustrates the flow of magic power within the body, comparing it to invisible blood vessels. She explains that miasma is easily absorbed and acts as a blockage, disrupting the flow of magic power like a clog in a vein. She points to the wrists and ankles, identifying them as barriers that govern this flow. If these barriers become clogged with too much miasma, the ability to use magic could be destroyed forever. Wisteria instructs Lloyd to concentrate for 3 days to visualize this flow. Lloyd agrees but decides to patrol during that time, causing Wisteria to worry about his recklessness. Alone, Wisteria reflects on her qualification as a guardian. She possessed a poor aptitude for drawing magic from elements but a constitution perfectly suited for handling miasma. She resolves to survive and hone her magic, recalling the sword's promise to never betray her. Her introspection is interrupted when Lloyd returns from his patrol much sooner than expected. He stares at her and calmly states that her magic power flow is purple. Wisteria is stunned that he mastered the visualization technique in less than a day. Lloyd describes seeing a huge flow like a bracelet or shackle, confirming he can see the barrier. He smirks, confident that the day he claims the holy sword is approaching fast. Wisteria advises him to rest, noting his exhaustion, and suggests they have dinner. As Lloyd walks toward the washroom, he casually says, "I'm home." Wisteria stands frozen, her heart trembling unexpectedly at the trivial but profound domestic greeting, realizing how deeply she craved such normalcy. Lloyd wakes with a jolt in the wooden hollow, his body heavy as he surfaces from a gray, suffocating dream. The sensation of sunlight filtering through the room contrasts sharply with the dark memories that linger in his mind. His consciousness drifts back to a fragmented memory of his childhood, where his small hand grips a wooden training sword. In the memory, his mother, Rosalie, scolds him frantically for engaging in dangerous activities, her voice trembling with fear for his safety. Young Lloyd argues back, insisting that despite his lack of magical talent, there must be something he can contribute to the ruining house. Rosalie counters him gently but firmly, asserting that he does not need to perform magic to be valuable. She reminds him that the ruining lineage has plenty of others capable of subjugating demons, but he is her precious son, and his safety matters more than his utility. Lloyd reflects on how she taught him that he was fine just the way he was, possessing a magnificent talent for swordplay that she accepted without reservation. The dream shifts to a colder reality, where adult aristocrats gossip about Lloyd entering the demon subjugation corps. They dismiss his service as the mere amusement of a bored noble, mocking him while superficially sending regards to his father, Bright. Lloyd trains alone with his sword, feeling the world turn gray and monotonous as he tries to master a path that combines the sword with his meager magic. The memory bleeds into a battlefield scene where Lloyd fights demons in torrential rain. He slips on the wet ground, his footing failing him as he is overwhelmed. He plunges off a cliff, falling into the abyss while his comrades look down in horror, wondering if he is a monster for surviving such falls. Lloyd wakes fully, gasping for breath, realizing the weight on his chest is the heavy realization that he must get stronger quickly. Outside the hollow, Wisteria observes him practicing his magic. She watches as he levitates, amazed by the speed at which he masters the techniques. She notes that he is like a wild horse, learning too fast and refusing to be reined in. Concerned for his safety, she warns him that running out of magic power mid-flight will lead to a fatal plunge. She restricts his practice altitude, ordering him to fly only within the safety of the hollow until he gains more experience. Lloyd agrees obediently, surprising her with his compliance. During a break, Lloyd remarks that Wisteria resembles neither his mother in looks nor manner. Wisteria dismisses this, reminding him they aren't related by blood, but then notes that Lloyd resembles his father, Bright, very much. The comparison visibly sours Lloyd's mood, and he turns away, his expression darkening. Sensing his discomfort, Wisteria tells him he doesn't need to attend to her so diligently and should return to his own work, but Lloyd refuses, driven by a need to prove himself. Saltus, the holy sword, manifests to mock Wisteria for acting like a mother hen, calling her behavior wretchedly pathetic, for doting on a disciple who might leave her. Later, as twilight sets in, Lloyd takes to the sky again, defying Wisteria's earlier restrictions. He flies higher and higher, driven by a desperate need to escape the miasma-filled dark sky and the suffocating comparisons to his father. He yearns to see a different scenery, to grasp something beyond the gray monotony of his life and determine his own worth. As he ascends, pushing his magic to the breaking point, he remembers the childhood cliff where a tree once caught him and saved his life. Suddenly his magic fails. The depletion strikes him mid-air, exactly as Wisteria warned. Lloyd begins to fall, realizing with grim acceptance that this time, there is no tree to catch him. He resigns himself to death, believing it best to fall alone rather than drag anyone else down with his foolishness. But he does not hit the ground. Wisteria intercepts him in mid-air, grabbing his hand. Lloyd panics, shouting for her to let go so she isn't caught in his fall. Wisteria screams back, calling him an idiot, and activates a transfer spell. They crash violently onto the floor of the tree hollow. Wisteria, who broke his fall with her own body, immediately begins scolding him for his recklessness, her voice thick with fear and relief. Lloyd, realizing he is lying on top of her, freezes. He asks if she used transfer, but then notices something missing. He frantically looks around and realizes he threw Saltus away during the fall to save the sword from the impact. He scrambles off Wisteria to retrieve the sword, finding Saltus buried in a pile of leaves, radiating silent fury. Lloyd apologizes profusely to the weapon, asking if it is injured. Saltus erupts, shouting that Lloyd should worry about himself, accusing him of apologizing like a cheating man. Wisteria watches this exchange, stunned. She realizes that unlike his father, Bright, who was cold and distant, Lloyd possesses a genuine capacity for care and regret. His eyes hold a warmth she hadn't expected. She places a hand on his shoulder, glad she made it in time to save him. Lloyd, humbled by the near-death experience and Wisteria's intervention, vows internally that he will not fall again, and more importantly, that he will never be alone again. A strawberry shortcake sits centered on a plate, serving as the catalyst for a conversation regarding consistency and preference. Lloyd observes that Wisteria always favors the same taste and inquires if there is a specific reason for her monotony. He explains his own pragmatic approach to sustenance, stating that he avoids food that digests too quickly and prioritizes verifying the safety of ingredients over enjoying their flavor. He claims to hold no particular likes or dislikes, viewing food merely as fuel that must not be poisonous. Wisteria finds his lack of interest in food amusing, noting his extreme pragmatism. Lloyd admits his interest is weak but acknowledges that he appreciates things he finds delicious. When pressed if there is something specific he wishes to eat, he reveals that what he desires requires significant effort and cannot be created in their current environment. The narrative shifts to a memory of Wisteria's past. Rosalie, looking radiant, presents a box containing the latest product from Gloire Marie, inviting Wisteria to have tea. Wisteria addresses Rosalie as Juanissima and thanks her. As they eat, Rosalie teases Wisteria for her placid reaction, though she insists Wisteria looks happy. Rosalie imparts a philosophy that sweets possess the effect of improving people's moods and that eating something sweet ensures everyone will be happy. She emphasizes that eating alone is lonely, suggesting that shared sweetness cures that isolation. Back in the present within the tree hollow, the holy sword Saltus wakes Wisteria. She decides to stop loafing around and prepares a preemptive strike in the form of breakfast. Lloyd wakes to a sweet aroma and approaches the table, where a bowl of porridge-like food awaits him. He eyes the dish suspiciously, asking if she has concocted an elaborate poison. Wisteria explains that she created the meal using plants Lloyd taught her about as a substitute for sweet flavoring, admitting she has long forgotten the true taste of the dish she is imitating. Lloyd tastes the meal while Wisteria watches with bated breath, telling him not to force himself if he dislikes it. To her surprise, Lloyd declares it very delicious and thanks her. When he asks why she made such a specific dish, she echoes Rosalie's sentiment, stating that sweets have the effect of improving people's moods. She adds that she prepared it because he previously mentioned he liked sweets. Lloyd agrees, noting that if it helps change the mood even a little, it is useful. As they eat together, Wisteria realizes that sharing a meal with Lloyd evokes a trembling in her heart she did not expect, finding the moment profound in its sweetness. Rain lashes against the towering, arched windows of the ruining estate, casting long, melancholic shadows over the interior where a harsh confrontation unfolds. Bright, the heir to the prestigious ruining house, stands with his hands clasped tightly before him, his face etched with desperation as he pleads for the life of Rosalie. His father, a man of cold, imposing stature, sits behind a heavy desk, dismissing his son's plea with a cruel pragmatism that prioritizes political stability over individual life. The patriarch explains that the power of the ruining house is not omnipotent and that to choose one thing inevitably means losing another. He interrogates Bright on what a powerless heir, one who cannot even perceive magic elements, could possibly offer in exchange for the massive political capital required to intervene in the guardian system. The father's words cut deep, labeling Bright a failure born with nothing but his looks, and asserting that interference with magic is forbidden to those who cannot wield it. Bright's internal turmoil manifests in a clenched fist, his father's verdict ringing in his ears. The tragedy is entirely the fault of magic itself. The narrative shifts to a luminous memory, where a young Rosalie smiles with a warmth that defies the gloom of the present. She gazes at Bright with affection, telling him that his lack of magic is actually a blessing in disguise. She teases that if he possessed such power, he would become an insufferable person, and she confesses that she cannot bear the thought of losing him. This memory serves as the bedrock of Bright's resolve. In the present, his expression hardens with determination. He silently vows to protect Rosalie by whatever means necessary, prepared to endure curses or rejection, his loyalty unshaken by his lack of mystical ability. The scene transitions to a rustic, wooden interior where Lloyd, the present-day identity of Bright, sits beside a bed, watching over a distraught Elaine. Elaine wakes in a state of delirium, her mind besieged by grief and confusion. Tears stream down her face as she grips the sheets, her heart aching with a desire to return home, yet she feels trapped by the perception that she is already considered dead by the world she left behind. Lloyd observes her suffering with a stoic compassion, noting that although she suppresses her screams, her internal agony is palpable. He speaks to her firmly, breaking through her despair by reminding her that in this isolated place, there is no one else to offer her aid. He urges her to listen, delivering a crucial lesson. She is the only one who possesses the freedom to decide the trajectory of her own life. As morning light floods the cabin, Elaine rouses from sleep, the memory of Lloyd's comforting hands still lingering in her mind. She finds herself alone in the room, discovering a note that chides her for being indolent and addresses her by the alias Salt. Flustered by the memory of Lloyd's intense, passionate gaze from the night before, she rises, feeling a nervous heat rise in her chest. She decides to head to the bathroom to compose herself, wondering if Lloyd is still asleep. She opens the wooden door, expecting solitude, but instead freezes in shock. Inside the bathroom, Lloyd stands in the process of dressing, his upper body completely bare. His physique is lean and muscular, a stark contrast to the childlike form Elaine sometimes perceives him as. He looks over his shoulder with a casual, almost predatory grace, asking if she intends to enter first. Elaine's reaction is immediate and explosive. She slams the door shut with a deafening crash, her face turning a violent shade of red. She collapses against the wall, hyperventilating, mortified by the realization that she has just seen the naked body of a man who is not her husband. Lloyd emerges from the bathroom moments later, fully dressed but looking mildly annoyed by the commotion. He chastises her for the dramatic apology, arguing that a gentleman of the ruining house has no reason to be ashamed of his body. He mocks her visible embarrassment, teasingly offering to let her touch him if she is so interested, which only sends Elaine into further denial. He points out that she was the one peeping with great interest, dismissing her protests with a wave of his hand. The banter continues as Lloyd sits, crossing his legs and declaring that there is nothing interesting about a naked child, a comment that confuses and irritates Elaine. Elaine notices that in his haste, Lloyd has buttoned his tunic incorrectly, the fabric bunching awkwardly. She points out the mismatch and he realizes his own clumsiness. Moving closer, she begins to rebutton his shirt, a domestic gesture that temporarily bridges the gap between them. Lloyd looks down at her, commenting that despite her earlier fluster, she is acting surprisingly childish herself. He then leans in with a smirk, telling her to stop acting like a wife, as it is too late to undo the fact that she has seen him naked. He then casually mentions his desire to remain respectful to his future wife, Her Highness Irene, dropping the name with a nonchalance that shatters the moment. Elaine recoils, scandalized by the implication of infidelity, and scolds him for being unfaithful, even if his current companion is merely a child in his eyes. Lloyd decides to end the conversation with a display of authority, subjecting Elaine to a spell of reflection and levitation as punishment for her outburst. He leaves her floating in the air while he prepares for their excursion. Later, he leads her outside, the landscape shifting to a rugged, mist-covered terrain. He presents her with a magnificent, ornate sword, its hilt encrusted with gems. He explains that this noble weapon will only allow its true master to draw it, implying a test of her worthiness. He instructs her to keep it with her at all times for protection against the monsters that roam the area. In a sudden burst of defiance and curiosity, Elaine unsheathes the sword and swings it at Lloyd. He anticipates the move instantly, blocking the strike with the flat of his own sheath without flinching. He reprimands her, calling it the height of foolishness to attack so suddenly without assessing the difference in their abilities. However, he notes that while there was hostility in her strike, there was no true malice, suggesting he understands her need to test her boundaries. Elaine, realizing her rashness, lowers the weapon and apologizes, admitting she was short-sighted. They stand before a breathtaking yet terrifying vista. A colossal, withered tree dominates the horizon, its gnarled roots spreading across the barren earth. Lloyd explains that this is the great dragon tree, the source of the miasma that permeates the land. He reveals that no human can survive prolonged exposure to this miasma, which is why he intervened to save her. He explains that this land is a habitat for demons, and the miasma is the raw source of magic element for the other world. Elaine realizes that the anomalies occurring in this land are directly linked to the tree's influence. Suddenly, the ground beneath them vibrates. Lloyd detects the presence of enemies long before they become visible, identifying a school of lurking fish moving beneath the soil. Elaine is startled by his heightened perception, wondering how he possesses such battlefield awareness. Lloyd seizes the opportunity to explain the nature of demons further. He states that demons are born in this miasma and that their ability to use magic is akin to opening a small gate to channel power. He then turns to Elaine and reveals a fundamental truth about himself. He is also a demon, ageless and sustained by this very environment. Elaine, unable to process this information, tries to dismiss it as an unfunny joke, but Lloyd's serious demeanor offers no retraction. The atmosphere grows tense as the monsters erupt from the ground in the valley below, grotesque, multi-legged creatures swarming in the dust. Lloyd commands Elaine not to call him a witch again, asserting his dominance. He decides to demonstrate a new form of magic and asks Elaine to identify the best defensive strategy for their current position. Elaine suggests a preemptive strike using their geographical advantage. Lloyd approves but refines the tactic, emphasizing the importance of long-range attacks to stay out of the enemy's reach. Raising his hand, Lloyd manifests a celestial bow, a construct of pure magical energy. He draws back the glowing string, targeting the swarm below. With a loose, he unleashes a devastating volley of energy arrows that rain down upon the monsters, causing massive explosions of dust and debris. The creatures are annihilated in seconds. Lloyd lowers the bow, smugly attributing the success to his wonderful teaching method. Elaine, impressed despite herself, acknowledges the effectiveness of long-range combat. As the dust settles, Lloyd gazes down at the carnage, his expression darkening slightly. He suggests they descend to investigate the bottom of the cliff, suspecting that such a large gathering of monsters indicates a deeper, abnormal disturbance within the miasma. Elaine stands amidst the carnage of the battlefield, the air thick with the metallic scent of blood rising from the scattered remains of the insectoid monsters. She surveys the desolate landscape, her gaze drawn to the twisted, colossal roots of the great dragon tree that dominates the horizon. She questions whether the miasma permeating the air feels any different from the usual toxic atmosphere of the wasteland, searching for anomalies that might explain the density of the monsters. Her eyes shift to Lloyd, who stands calmly among the ruin he created. She notes with a mixture of awe and concern that he seems entirely accustomed to this level of violence, his demeanor unruffled by the slaughter. Despite the gruesome surroundings, she concludes there is nothing immediately abnormal about the environment itself, save for the sheer scale of death. Suddenly, the earth beneath Elaine trembles and splits. A massive, lurking fish, a grotesque worm-like behemoth, erupts from the ground directly behind her, debris showering the air. The creature's maw gapes wide, revealing rows of jagged teeth destined for her. Elaine freezes, her mind racing with a morbid pragmatism as she hopes the beast will at least miss her vital organs, resigned to the inevitability of the strike. However, the blow never lands. Lloyd screams her name, his voice cutting through her paralysis. In a blur of motion, he intercepts the attack, shouting for her to let go of her hesitation. He seizes her and launches them both upward, escaping the jaws of the monster just as they snap shut on empty air. As they ascend to safety, Lloyd's focus remains locked on the ground below, his expression grim. The earth explodes a second time, but this time the scale is vastly different. A colossal predator rises, its jaws clamping down on the lurking fish that had just attacked Elaine, swallowing it whole. Lloyd identifies the new threat immediately. It is not a juvenile, but a fully grown adult great serpent, likely lured from the depths by the scent of the lurking fish's carcass. The massive serpent towers over the landscape, its 4 eyes glowing with malevolent intelligence as it fixes its gaze upon them. Elaine stares into the face of the demon, overwhelmed by its sheer size and the predatory aura it emits. Lloyd recognizes the beast, his face tightening with a mix of recognition and caution. He makes a split-second tactical decision, declaring that there is no need to engage such a formidable enemy at this moment. He orders an immediate retreat, prioritizing their survival over a pointless skirmish. As they put distance between themselves and the monster, Elaine notices a streak of crimson marring Lloyd's face. Panic laces her voice as she points out the blood on his cheek, realizing he was injured during the rescue. Lloyd dismisses her concern with stoic nonchalance, asking instead if she is unharmed. He insists the injury is merely a graze, a trivial price for their escape. The sentient sword at Elaine's hip, Saltus, chimes in with a harsh critique, labeling the near-fatal encounter an inexcusable blunder that would typically result in death. Elaine accepts the reprimand, lowering her head in shame and thanking Lloyd for his intervention. Lloyd, however, defends his actions, stating that he is only careful because he now has something he must protect, implying his dedication to Elaine's safety. Elaine apologizes again for showing him such a disgraceful sight, her pride as a knight stung by her helplessness. Lloyd shifts the conversation to a strategic analysis of the enemy. He notes that in all his knowledge, there are no records of a great serpent teleporting to the other world. He theorizes that the magical energy required to transfer a demon is proportional to its size, making it impossible for a beast as massive as the great serpent to cross the boundary between worlds. The sword Saltus scoffs at the beast, arrogantly claiming that the louder a creature barks, the weaker it truly is, and suggests they should have simply subjugated it. Lloyd counters this bravado with cold facts, explaining that the great serpent possesses an incredibly high resistance to magic, making it a difficult opponent for a mage. Elaine recalls the serpent's behavior, noting that it seemed specifically hostile toward Lloyd, as if it recognized him. She wonders aloud if Lloyd's master, with his immense strength, could have defeated it. Lloyd corrects her assumption, revealing that he has fought this specific four-eyed adult serpent before. He validates Elaine's earlier instincts, confirming that cutting it down with a sword is indeed effective. However, in their previous encounter, the beast fled before he could finish it off. He explains the terrifying nature of the creature. It became consumed by burning vengeance after their fight. Furthermore, he details its regenerative capabilities, stating that unless the eyes are destroyed, it recovers completely and grows twice as large each time it molts. Elaine asks why he fought such a dangerous creature in the first place. Lloyd's expression softens into something more somber as he reveals a secret from his past. He once kept a demon as a pet. Elaine is shocked by the revelation. Lloyd describes the creature as being larger than a cat but docile, a companion he took with him everywhere. He admits that due to his own carelessness and lack of power at the time, the pet was killed. While he was away, his pet encountered the great serpent. The memory visibly pains him. Lloyd describes returning to find the serpent toying with the corpse of his companion. He deduces that the great serpent, driven by intense inquisitiveness, targeted the unfamiliar prey specifically to provoke him. He explains that the beast showed an interest in him, leading to the death of the child he cared for. He names the serpent Digra to distinguish it from others of its kind, marking it as a personal nemesis. Despite his calm exterior, Lloyd declares he will not concede to the beast, but he advises Elaine to avoid battling it for now, promising her that she will be stronger in the future. He grimly recalls that the serpent was laughing as it stood over his pet's body. Back in the safety of the cabin, the atmosphere shifts to a quieter intimacy. Lloyd removes his cloak, and Elaine sees that the wound is not just on his face. The graze went through his clothing. Lloyd tries to brush it off as a minor scratch not worth worrying about. Elaine, however, is adamant. She insists that even the slightest wound can fester unexpectedly due to the miasma's influence. Guilt-ridden, she blames herself for the injury. She approaches him, unbuttoning his shirt to treat the wound on his chest. Lloyd teases her, calling her a worrywart and suggesting she has an interest in his body, but allows her to proceed. As she tends to him, Elaine marvels at his physical condition, noting that his body is completely different from hers. He is honed and scarred like a warrior. She remarks that he is truly strong, more of a knight than a nobleman. She asks why he goes to such lengths to train, pointing out that he relies on hard work rather than just his natural talents. Lloyd opens up, explaining that for as long as he can remember, people told him he had great potential. He trains because he wants to know the meaning of being born with such power. He admits that even within the long history of the ruining house, he outshines his predecessors. Lloyd speaks of his swordmaster, a man he describes as a broken-down knight, far from the ideal of a proper master. This master told Lloyd that he would only ever be the fourth strongest in the world, a statement Lloyd took as a challenge, refusing to settle for such a rank. His master taught him a philosophy that stuck with him, that truth is something one spends a lifetime pursuing, yet may never find. He warned Lloyd that possessing power without a personal truth, a sense of justice and value found within oneself, turns strength into meaningless violence. Lloyd confesses that even now, he has not found his truth. He reflects on the isolation of his existence, where his lineage and talent serve as barriers that separate him from others. He speaks of the loneliness of being misunderstood, of people making assumptions about him regardless of his actions. He did not ask to be born with this power, yet he bears the weight of it. He turns his gaze to Elaine, challenging her perception of herself and the world. He suggests that if she is told magic is unimportant, she is inclined to think about it even more. He probes her motivations, asking if she lacked the courage to accept Bright's inability to use magic as he was. He questions if her purpose is truly to fight demons for the royal family or faceless subjects, or if she has failed to find her own meaning within that grandiose cause. He admits that he, too, did not become a guardian for a greater cause. His motivation is simple. He wants to test himself, to see how much he can do and how far he can go. Lloyd looks at Elaine with a piercing intensity, telling her that she is like a brand new canvas, capable of absorbing anything. He acknowledges her potential, stating there is no lack of ability in her. He tells her that while he cannot give her the answers, she can take home as many souvenirs of magic as she can to find her own personal meaning. He encourages her, believing that because it is her, she will be able to acquire a great deal. The serious moment is interrupted by the sword Saltus, who complains about having to listen to Lloyd's idle complaints and great sermon. The sword mocks Lloyd for preaching without having any real conviction, calling him a small fry. Lloyd, annoyed, snaps back at the sword, flicking it and noting that despite being a holy sword, it must be sturdy enough to handle being slammed against a rock. Elaine watches the interaction, feeling a strange agitation rising within her. She realizes that Lloyd, despite being her disciple, is affecting her deeply. She tells herself she must brace herself for what is to come, sensing a shift in their dynamic. In the opulent, high-ceilinged chambers of the Esquial Palace, Princess Irene sits before a chessboard, her fingers hovering over a piece with calculated grace. The click of the chess piece against the board punctuates the tension as she faces her brother, Prince Elias Conrad Marcial. Elias observes her composure, remarking that she appears far calmer than he anticipated, questioning the depth of her trust in Lloyd Allen. He interrogates her confidence, suggesting that if she truly believes in Lloyd, she might be underestimating the situation. Irene retorts with icy precision, declaring that if Elias believes Lloyd would fall at this level, he lacks the capability to be her spouse. She reasons that the absence of a specific signal indicates Lloyd is still alive. Her conviction remains unshaken. She asserts that Lloyd excels against demons more than any other opponent. Elias, leaning back with an air of cynical amusement, challenges her resolve, asking if her faith stems from mere wishful thinking. He internally dismisses her as a shallow woman blinded by love, believing she fails to see the hollowness within Lloyd. To Elias, Lloyd is an empty vessel, a man who possesses overwhelming power but follows a mere model of knighthood without a soul of his own. He describes Lloyd's battlefield existence as one of savage valor, where he stands alone in the darkness, breathing amidst the slaughter while his comrades lie routed. Elias posits that Lloyd fears neither death nor seeks honor, rendering him a perfect, albeit empty, weapon. Irene, however, sees a different truth. She recalls a light in Lloyd's eyes that sought her without hesitation, a sweetness too cold to be passion yet too genuine to be calculation. She believes she is the only one to whom Lloyd has truly knelt, distinct from the women who leave him upon realizing his emotional unavailability. While the world labels him the ideal lover, Irene perceives the barrier around his heart. She sweeps the chess pieces from the board in a sudden, violent gesture, declaring Lloyd as her knight, fighting solely to become the first to serve her. Elias, observing her outburst, questions if she intends to fill Lloyd's void and become his truth. He warns that without a personal truth, Lloyd's strength is meaningless violence, and advises her to tame him if he survives. Irene, staring at the toppled king on the chessboard, acknowledges her loss in the game but earnestly vows to become that meaning for him. The narrative shifts to a sepia-toned memory of Lloyd's past. A younger, ragged Lloyd stands before a rugged swordmaster in a training yard. The master, a maverick far removed from the image of a proper knight, lectures Lloyd on the nature of power. Lloyd confesses his desire to know the meaning of his immense potential, having been told all his life of his greatness. The master imparts a heavy philosophy: truth is not easily found, but one must pursue it for a lifetime. Until Lloyd finds this truth, the master imposes a shackle upon him to prevent his power from becoming aimless violence. The restriction is simple yet profound. Lloyd must avoid killing his opponents whenever possible and always keep his promises to others. This self-imposed constraint is designed to help Lloyd take hold of his own reins. Back in the present, within the rustic cabin near the great dragon tree, Lloyd returns from the outdoors, a subtle tension lingering in the air. Elaine, currently disguised as Salt, greets him, her demeanor shifting into that of a scolding housewife as she chastises him for being late. She interrogates him about his whereabouts, suspecting he stayed out all night. Lloyd, attempting to deflect, presents a handful of food ingredients he gathered, claiming he ensured no demons were nearby. Elaine accepts the offering but reprimands him for going out alone, emphasizing the danger. Lloyd notices the subtle changes in the cabin. The cupboard door now closes smoothly, and the kitchen knife has been sharpened, revealing Elaine's meticulous nature even in this temporary life. The sentient sword Saltus interjects, grumbling about the courtship display before him, finding the domestic banter unfunny. Lloyd ignores the blade and addresses Elaine's earlier concerns about his safety. He asserts that he is not someone who needs her protection and that if he dies, it is his own responsibility. Elaine counters with equal stubbornness, declaring she will protect her own self and refuses to let him carry the burden alone. She tells him he can use her for chores, suggesting that even menial tasks can be training. Lloyd smiles, amused by her resilience, though he flatly refuses to hand over Saltus, regardless of her flattery. Elaine's mind drifts to a traumatic memory from her childhood as Wisteria. She recalls a sunny day at a summer resort where she played hide-and-seek with her younger sister, Rosalie. In a moment of carelessness, she let go of Rosalie's hand to hide. Panic ensued when Rosalie did not answer her calls. The terror of that moment, the fear that she would never see her sister again, scarred her. Rosalie was eventually found by a young boy, but the guilt remained. Wisteria vowed then to protect Rosalie, believing herself to be the only one capable of ensuring her sister's safety. This past trauma fuels her current determination to be strong and independent, even as Salt. Returning to the cabin's reality, Elaine prepares for her day. She informs Lloyd that she intends to visit a great dragon tree farther away and asks him to look after the house. Lloyd questions her solitary excursion, but Elaine insists, hinting that she needs to defeat a powerful demon to prove herself. She asks Lloyd what kind of demon would be appropriate to serve as a testimony of an ardent love, a cover for her true goal of proving her worth to the princess. Lloyd, his attitude softening, advises her to bring back a part of the fallen corpse as proof. He suggests she ask the kid, Saltus, which demon to target. As Elaine prepares to leave, stepping into her boots, a wave of melancholy washes over her. She realizes that simply not being alone has made her life significantly easier and more comfortable. She chastises herself for these feelings, reminding herself that Lloyd will eventually return to the other world. She resolves not to let him feel sorry for her, understanding that their time together is nothing more than a temporary dream. Yet as she steps out, the routine exchange of "I'm home" and "welcome home" echoes the domestic intimacy she tries to deny. Elaine and Lloyd stand amidst the swirling miasma of the wasteland, the air thick with tension and the scent of decay. Lloyd spots a patch of flora, prompting Elaine to explain that since she began patrolling the great dragon tree with him, she has noted these blue lilies, a name she arbitrarily assigned, which are harmless and potentially serve as good souvenirs. However, the tranquility shatters as Elaine senses a disturbance deep underground, recognizing it not as the usual lurking fish, but something capable of diving much deeper. Without warning, the ground erupts, and a colossal, segmented creature bursts forth, debris showering the area. Elaine identifies the beast as an earthworm, a demon that hunts by sound and possesses a troublesome, high-speed regenerative ability. She calculates the danger immediately. If the beast remains unchecked, it will damage the roots of the great dragon tree, potentially causing the tree to activate and release thicker miasma. She informs Lloyd that the creature's only weak point is a soft, greenish-tinged section in the middle of its body. However, the celestial bow she wields can only strike this core if the worm is pulled entirely out of the ground. Elaine formulates a ruthless strategy to dull the creature's movements by exciting it with the smell of blood. She draws a dagger, intending to slice her own arm to create a lure. Before the blade touches her skin, Lloyd intercepts her hand with a crushing grip, stopping her self-mutilation. He demands to know if she intends to hurt herself over a mere demon and questions if she fails to count him as a fighting force. He rejects her rationale that a small cut is necessary, refusing to watch her bleed for tactical advantage. Lloyd proposes an alternative. Since the creature tracks by sound, he will act as a decoy to lure it into the air, allowing Elaine to provide support fire. Elaine hesitates, knowing the danger of fighting such a beast at close range, but Lloyd counters that he is not someone who needs her protection. He asserts that he came prepared and will be responsible for his own life, demanding she trust in his strength as he believes in hers. Recognizing that stopping him would be an act of distrust, Elaine agrees to the plan, ordering him to clear the enemy immediately without showing incompetence. The battle commences with Lloyd charging the earthworm, his movements creating the sonic lure necessary to draw its attention. He strikes the beast, severing a tentacle, but realizes he must move further away to fully expose its body for Elaine's shot. As the earthworm lunges at Lloyd, guided by the sound of his movements, Elaine unleashes the celestial bow. A massive beam of energy pierces the creature just as Lloyd predicted, striking the weak point in its midsection while it is airborne. Lloyd follows up instantly, his sword cutting through the remaining segments, and Elaine delivers a final, explosive shot to ensure its destruction. Dust settles over the battlefield. Lloyd stands uninjured, remarking that the odds were good and the victory reasonable. He chastises Elaine for her earlier recklessness, pointing out that she blundered by trying to handle everything at close range. Elaine, shaken by the realization of how much burden he carries in his fighting style, acknowledges that they mesh well in combat, neither sustaining injuries. Saltus, the sentient sword, comments that Elaine's policies are too radical and she should let her cheeky disciple wander between life and death occasionally. As they prepare to leave, Lloyd descends into a crater, telling Elaine to go ahead. He returns moments later, holding a blue lily in his hand. With a disarming smile, he presents it to her as a souvenir, noting it smells sweeter than expected. Elaine reacts with pure, innocent shock, blushing furiously at the gesture. Saltus mocks the act as a childish prank, but Elaine, flustered, accepts the flower, stammering her thanks and admitting she is pleased. Back at their cabin, domestic normalcy returns. Elaine prepares a vase for the flower, her mind racing with the embarrassment of the gift. She notices subtle changes in the house. The cupboard door, which usually sticks, now opens smoothly, and the kitchen knife has been sharpened. She realizes Lloyd has been meticulously caring for their home, putting time and effort into chores to ease her burden. Lloyd casually remarks that she can use him for chores as he considers it training, reinforcing his desire to support her. Later that night, Elaine lies in bed, overwhelmed by the comfort of not being alone. However, dark thoughts encroach. She reminds herself that Lloyd is a light, meant for the next generation and will eventually return to the other world. She resolves not to let her emotions consume her, believing her life with him is a temporary dream. Driven by an unseen compulsion, she leaves the cabin while Lloyd sleeps, wandering out into the night. Lloyd, however, is awake. He senses her departure and follows her. He finds Elaine standing alone in the darkness, staring into the abyss. He confronts her, demanding she stop screwing around, and asks why a pitiful woman is staring at her own death. He recounts his experience with knights who know the dawn and thus do not fear the night, but he looks at Elaine, someone who has survived alone in this world for 23 years, and questions the sanity of a person who knows not of dawn. The chapter ends with Lloyd challenging the reality of her survival in this desolate world. A blonde aristocrat swirls wine in a glass, lecturing an attentive companion on the true nature of art, defining a painting not merely as an image, but as the act of capturing a fleeting moment in the world. He argues that true artistic expression arises when the heart moves, leaving a lasting impression that defies simple categorization into joy, anger, or grief. Sensing the Marchioness's hesitation regarding her own artistic sensibility, he invites her to use the studio in his mansion, suggesting that the act of creation itself might help her identify the moment she wishes to capture. Alone in the room, Wisteria, the Marchioness, broods over her emotional stagnation, unable to recall the last time her heart truly stirred, her expression remaining stoic and flat. Her attention shifts to the holy sword resting nearby, and while she trusts the repair work, she critiques its immense size, wondering if Lloyd possesses the exceptional physique required to wield such a weapon effectively. Seeking a comparison, she slips her arms into a large jacket left in the room, the fabric engulfing her small frame and triggering a memory of a man named Bright, who also stood tall. Surrounded by the scent of the coat, Wisteria finds herself transported back to a warm soiree, clutching the fabric as she relives a suppressed memory of Lloyd draping a jacket over her shoulders. The sudden flood of unwanted nostalgia overwhelms her, only to be shattered when Lloyd himself strides into the room, announcing his return. He freezes in the doorway, eyes widening as he catches Wisteria red-handed, wrapped in his clothing. Lloyd breaks the tension with a teasing smirk, leaning in to ask if she felt so lonely that she needed his jacket for comfort, causing Wisteria to recoil and flush a deep crimson. She stammers a desperate fabrication, claiming she was merely inspecting the garment's size and tensility before threatening to dispose of it to hide her shame. Lloyd dismisses her threat with practical ease, stating he will simply have the working wings craft another, and points out that her wearing it renders the size comparison meaningless. He ruthlessly presses the advantage, suggesting she clings to the jacket as a substitute for his presence, while Wisteria vehemently denies the accusation, her face burning. When Lloyd demands the return of his property, Wisteria refuses, clutching it tighter and insisting she must wash it first because it is dirty, likely from her earlier emotional display. Lloyd counters that the garment is pristine, but upon seeing her stubborn refusal, he mischievously offers to wear it immediately to refresh his scent for her, a proposal that sends Wisteria into a panic, shouting that she doesn't need it. Admitting defeat in this emotional skirmish, Wisteria pivots to the topic of art, declaring she isn't cut out for such banter and demanding paint to distract herself. Lloyd settles into a chair to serve as her model, though he cannot resist mocking her, remarking that painting is a superior pursuit for a holy sword dano, who typically relies on martial arts rather than intellect. Ignoring his taunts, Wisteria focuses on the charcoal and board, recalling his earlier lesson about capturing a moment and sketches with rapid intensity. She presents the finished board with a flourish, only for Lloyd to discover that she has completely ignored her model to draw a detailed, loving portrait of the holy sword in its carrying box. He berates her as an insolent lout for her lack of focus on him, but his expression softens as he recognizes the genuine spark of inspiration in her work. Lloyd excuses himself to clean his room, instructing her to stay and continue drawing, acknowledging that she has finally found the subject that moves her heart, as Wisteria marvels at how smoothly her brush now moves. Lloyd stands before the sword Saltus, who hangs mounted on the wall. Saltus probes Lloyd's mind, asking if he truly believed Elaine could survive alone in this other world for 23 years and remain sane. Lloyd's hand clenches into a fist, his knuckles white, but he remains silent. Saltus mocks him, asking if the cat got his tongue. Lloyd's mind races, re-evaluating his perception of Elaine. He considers the hidden depths beneath her stoic exterior. He recalls her earlier words, "If it's you, it's because it's you too, you'll be able to acquire a lot." He realizes he underestimated what she was truly feeling when she said those words. Suddenly, a disturbance. Lloyd looks up sharply. Elaine is gone. Lloyd rushes outside, his senses scanning the environment. He sees the demon butterflies, creatures that swarm towards miasma like bees to honey. He realizes that Elaine's accumulated miasma, a result of her long years as a guardian, acts as a beacon for these monsters. He finds her. Elaine stands alone, surrounded by the glittering, deadly swarm. Her figure looks frail and cold in the pale light. Lloyd calls her name, his voice laced with shock. He is struck by how thin she looks, how isolated. The vibrant, strong woman he knows seems to have vanished, replaced by a ghost of herself. Lloyd steps closer, his gaze fixed on her eyes. They are empty, devoid of the fire he is accustomed to. He describes them as beautiful, like the moon, but it is a cold, distant beauty. He realizes with a jolt that there is no one here. The woman standing before him is hollowed out. He confronts the reality of her existence. He asks himself if he truly thought she could remain sane in a world with no sun, no moon, no stars. A world of perpetual twilight and darkness. He understands now that the environment itself is a psychological torture chamber. He reaches out and grabs her wrist. Her skin is cold. He feels a surge of anger, not at her, but at the situation, at himself. He questions who he is getting angry for. He looks at her, really looks at her, and acknowledges that despite her fragility, she is incredibly strong to have survived this long. He sees the scars of 23 years of solitude and duty. He asks her where she is going. Elaine, her voice distant, replies that she is going to the Great Dragon Tree. She speaks of it as her duty, the reason she was driven to this desolate place. Lloyd counters, telling her she shouldn't be here. He asks where else she has to go. Elaine's eyes, dull and lifeless, reflect the hopelessness of her situation. She has nowhere else. Lloyd makes a decision. He tells her that if she can't sleep, he will keep her company. He refuses to let her wander alone in the dark. He pulls her back towards the cabin, his grip firm but protective. Elaine resists, telling him to get lost, but Lloyd ignores her, dragging her away from the abyss. Back inside, Lloyd pours her a warm drink. He tells Saltus to shut up when the sword tries to interfere. Elaine sits at the table, her hands trembling around the mug. Lloyd watches her, his expression unreadable but intense. He reveals a piece of his own history, telling her he has a younger sister. He shares a memory of comforting his sister with a warm drink when she was scared of the dark. He admits it became a habit. Elaine, her defenses lowering, asks if he is treating her like a child. Lloyd smiles, pointing out that the drink was effective. Elaine concedes, admitting it's true. The tension breaks slightly. Lloyd then drops a bombshell. He asks who she was thinking of so intensely that she made such a face outside. He asks if she was in love with someone. Elaine freezes, her face flushing. She tries to deflect, telling him not to make her remember. Lloyd pushes further. He asks if she was gripping the sword so tightly because she was lonely, if she wanted it as a substitute for him. He teases her, asking if she was wearing his jacket because she yearned for him. Elaine, flustered and embarrassed, denies it vehemently. She tries to take off the jacket, claiming she will wash it and return it. Lloyd stops her, telling her there is no need. He says he was just checking the size and durability of the fabric, a flimsy excuse that Elaine sees right through but accepts. The scene shifts to a flashback in the ruining estate. The current Duke ruining, Lloyd's father, sits in his study, looking at a book titled, Concerning the Elucidation of the Principle of Magic, and How to See Magic Elements. The book is a research record by Wisteria Elaine Rafferty. A younger man, Benjamin Labra, stands before him. The Duke speaks of Lloyd's failure to manifest magic, a stain on the ruining name. He mentions that even Labra concurs it is impossible for Lloyd to use magic with his current ability. However, the Duke's tone is cold, calculating. He reveals that he has decided not to regret his choices again. He looks at the book, Wisteria's Legacy, and muses on the possibility of a different choice. He wonders if he could have made a different decision back then, if he could have stopped the tragedy. But his thoughts are interrupted by the arrival of Lloyd, who has been summoned. The Duke tells Lloyd there is no need for concern and orders him to go and come back as soon as possible. Lloyd agrees, his face impassive. The Duke is left alone with his thoughts. He acknowledges that regretting is the same as giving up on Lloyd. He reminds himself that only one person may pass through the gate. He thinks of the other candidate for guardian, a child who is still alive. He steels himself, deciding that even if it is upsetting, there is nothing left to do but wait. He knows that sending a search party is futile. They cannot bring Lloyd home. The scene returns to the present. Lloyd and Elaine are in the cabin. The atmosphere is quiet, heavy with unspoken words. Lloyd's intervention has pulled Elaine back from the brink, but the shadow of her 23 years of isolation still hangs over them. The chapter ends with a sense of precarious balance, a temporary respite in a world that offers none. The narrative commences within the bustling, sun-drenched streets of the capital, where Lady Esther encounters Mr. Edwin outside a cafe. Esther, noting she hasn't seen him in a while, approaches with a specific inquiry in mind. They retire to a table, where the conversation immediately pivots to Lloyd Allen. Edwin, aware of Esther's previous relationship with Lloyd, a status he acknowledges with a touch of cynicism, suggests that she is seeking closure regarding the man she cannot forget. He describes Lloyd as a dreamlike ideal lover, a man who is outwardly kind and faithful yet remains fundamentally impenetrable. Edwin observes that Lloyd never speaks of himself, his past, his thoughts, or his family, and maintains a rigid distance, never interfering with his partner's lives. Esther presses for understanding, asking if anyone truly knows why Lloyd wields a sword, especially given his status as the heir to the ruining house. Edwin admits that no one possesses the answer. He reveals that Lloyd occasionally disappears to a sanctuary, a solitary place where he faces his own self, isolated from the world. Edwin confesses that even he, a close associate, cannot fathom the depths of Lloyd's character. The conversation turns to current events. Rumors circulate that Lloyd is close to an engagement with Her Highness, Princess Irene, and has departed on an expedition. Esther, tears pricking her eyes, admits she hoped Lloyd would chase after her, but Edwin advises her to find a new love, warning that waiting for a man like Lloyd, who has always been somewhere far away, will only bring further pain. The scene shifts abruptly to the desolate cabin in the other world. Lloyd stands frozen before the wall-mounted holy sword, Saltus. The sword taunts him, asking if he truly believed Elaine could survive alone in this realm for 23 years and remain sane. Lloyd clenches his fist, the realization crashing down upon him as Saltus mocks his side. The story returns to the cabin the following morning. Lloyd is cooking breakfast, a savory soup simmering in a pot. Elaine enters, looking exhausted but composed. Lloyd greets her, and she apologizes for the disgraceful sight she presented the previous night. Lloyd, focused on the cooking, asks about her physical and mental state. Saltus interjects, calling Lloyd an object without a tongue, sparking a brief bickering match. Elaine, watching Lloyd's back, feels a pang of anxiety. She realizes she cannot endure looking him in the eyes. They sit down to eat. Lloyd, sensing her gaze, asks if she finds it surprising that he can cook. He explains he often cooked for his sister to avoid the hassle of servants. Elaine compliments the food, noting he eats well. The conversation grows heavy when Lloyd brings up her condition from the night before. He suggests it was caused by accumulated fatigue and the miasma affecting her psyche, describing it as a half-dream state. He reassures her that he doesn't think she is insane, but advises caution. Suddenly, Lloyd stops eating. He senses a strong gaze from Elaine, one that contains neither disappointment nor cynicism. He confronts her, asking why she is looking at him with eyes that seem ready to intrude upon his soul. Elaine, internally panicking, realizes she must brace herself. She decides to speak, not to pry, but to caution him. Elaine's internal monologue reveals the crushing truth she harbors. She knows that the gate to the other world requires a massive amount of magical power to open and can only transport one person. She looks at Lloyd, acknowledging him as a light meant for the next generation. She has already resigned herself to the fact that Lloyd will eventually leave, and she will remain behind. She recalls burying these feelings long ago, choosing to accept her fate calmly to keep herself together. However, looking at him now, she compares him to the moonlight that illuminates everything on Earth, beautiful, distant, and impossible to ignore. She resolves to endure the loneliness that will inevitably return when he departs, cherishing the temporary dream of his presence while it lasts. In the quiet confines of their cabin, a tense negotiation unfolds between Lloyd and Elaine. Saltus, the Holy Sword, comments that the prying into their personal lives is only happening because Elaine is hesitating to settle things before her feelings become strangely sentimental. Elaine agrees she needs to resolve the situation, her resolve firming. She retrieves a small box containing salt, a magical substance, but declares she absolutely cannot hand it over to Lloyd just yet. She needs suitable proof to make him give up on obtaining it and return home. Saltus, disgusted by the emotional maneuvering, calls her a little fool. Elaine turns to Lloyd and bluntly asks if she can become his true master. Lloyd is taken aback, unable to immediately respond. Saltus mocks him, asking if the cat got his tongue. Elaine, however, presses on, stating that she has keenly realized her lack of talent as a warrior since Lloyd's arrival. She admits she has no aptitude for it, unlike him. Lloyd, sensing a shift in the conversation, remains guarded. Suddenly, a magical glow envelopes him. He realizes too late that Elaine has activated a spell. He finds himself bound by an invisible force, his movements restricted. Elaine stands behind him, having cast a binding spell, her expression a mix of determination and regret. She apologizes, stating that she needs to settle this. Lloyd, now immobilized, demands to know what she is doing. He asks if she was attacked by demons, his first instinct being concern for her safety rather than his own predicament. Elaine denies this, clarifying that she defeated the demons but is now taking measures to ensure he doesn't follow her into danger. She admits she let him go alone before, implying she won't make that mistake again. Elaine then challenges him to a duel of sorts. She proposes a training session that mimics actual combat, allowing him to use magic while she relies on her sword, a handicap given her earlier admission of incompetence. Lloyd, confident to the point of arrogance, accepts the challenge but declares he will use nothing but reflection to defeat her, looking down on her reliance on rules. He suggests a wager to make things interesting. He wants answers to his questions about her. Elaine, having nothing material to offer, agrees to answer one question if she loses. The combat begins. Elaine attempts to strike Lloyd from behind, but her attack is effortlessly repelled by an invisible barrier. Lloyd reveals he has seen this magic before, shield, and knows how to counter it. He analyzes her fighting style, noting that her defensive magic slows down her offensive capabilities, making her movements sluggish. He taunts her, calling her defenseless and incompetent. Elaine, however, is not without a plan. She realizes she cannot match Lloyd's speed or power. Her only chance is to wait for the brief moment when his shield deactivates, the moment of relaxation just before an attack lands. She bides her time, enduring his taunts, waiting for that single instant of vulnerability. When the moment arrives, she strikes. But instead of a blade, she lunges forward and tackles him in a hug. Lloyd, caught off guard by the unorthodox move, loses his balance. They tumble to the ground, Lloyd instinctively cushioning her fall with his arms to protect her head and back. Lying on top of him, Elaine declares victory. The rules were simple. The first person whose front or back touches the ground loses. Lloyd, pinned beneath her, realizes he has been outsmarted not by strength, but by a technicality and his own chivalry. He is incredulous, asking if she planned this from the start. Elaine admits she exploited his lack of experience in person-to-person combat, though she wonders if he let her win on purpose. True to his word, Lloyd agrees to answer her question. Elaine, flustered by their proximity and the intimacy of the moment, stammers. She tries to retreat, but Lloyd holds her fast, demanding she ask her question now. He refuses to let her run away. Elaine, her face burning, finally asks the question that has been plaguing her, "Were you in love with someone?" Lloyd is silent for a moment. He looks at her, his expression softening. He admits that he won't answer that specific question, as it pertains to a pain that has long since faded. Instead, he offers a different truth. He tells her that he is sick of hopes and assumptions that won't come true. He urges her to stop saying things she can't do, like pushing him away. He then pulls her into a tight embrace, burying his face in her shoulder. He whispers that if she hadn't intervened, he wouldn't have noticed how gentle her hands are. He confesses that he doesn't want to answer anything other than this feeling right now. Elaine, overwhelmed by his vulnerability and the physical contact, tries to push him away, reminding him of his duty to Princess Irene and the rumors of his engagement. Lloyd dismisses it all. He tells her that there is someone else who will become his wife, implying it is not the princess. He holds her closer, refusing to let go, leaving Elaine flustered and confused by the depth of his emotions. The narrative transitions to a lavish, sun-drenched garden, where Princess Irene strolls amidst the blooming roses, accompanied by Lloyd. The atmosphere is serene, yet the princess's words cut through the tranquility with sharpness. She asks Lloyd if he keeps his word, stating her abhorrence for uncertainties. She mentions hearing of others who have tried to court her, the White Rose, only to meet tragic ends through political maneuvering, accidents, or sudden changes of heart. She implies that her favor is a dangerous game, one that few survive. Lloyd, maintaining his composed demeanor, assures her that he has never broken a formal contract or promise. Irene observes him closely, noting his cold eyes, which seem to suggest that love and eternity are mere illusions. She warns him that she would be disappointed if he valued himself solely based on his lineage and inherited looks. The conversation shifts to the legendary holy sword, Saltus. Irene recounts the history. Saltus grants great strength to its chosen master but has not chosen anyone for hundreds of years. One man was once recognized as its master, a hero who saved the country from destruction during a great war and overlapping demon invasions. This hero was rewarded with the hand of a princess, fighting out of love for her. However, since then, Saltus has remained dormant, leading many, including Irene's brother, to dismiss it as a scrap of metal or a fabrication. Irene, however, expresses a desire to believe. She wonders if Lloyd, despite the ridicule of others, possesses the raw makings for great achievements. She demands that he not disappoint her and challenges him to accomplish what even his father, Duke Ruining, cannot, to prove his feelings and strength. She extracts a vow from him, a promise that if he keeps his word to take his own reins and bring back Saltus, she will keep hers as well. She warns him not to betray her, declaring that she will be waiting for Lloyd Allen Ruining. The scene shifts back to the rustic cabin in the other world. Lloyd awakens to find Elaine watching over him. She places a hand on his chest, telling him to never break his vows. It is a moment of intense connection, where the past and present seem to blur. Elaine, recalling her own history, urges him to surpass that person without fail. She feels a fleeting sense of grasping something tangible, a connection that goes beyond their current circumstances. Later, they sit at the table. Lloyd, now awake and alert, confronts Elaine about her behavior. He asks if she was surprised to learn he has a younger sister. Elaine admits she is, and Lloyd shares a tender memory of comforting his sister when she was scared of the dark. The conversation turns to Elaine's own emotional state. Lloyd probes deeper, asking who she was thinking of earlier that made her look so desolate. He asks if she was in love with someone. Elaine tries to deflect, begging him not to make her remember. Lloyd presses on, pointing out her actions, gripping the sword, wearing his jacket, betray her loneliness. He asks if she wanted the sword as a substitute for him, if she yearned for him. Elaine, flushed and defensive, denies it, trying to remove the jacket. Lloyd stops her, offering to wear it himself to warm it up before giving it back, a gesture that flusters her further. Lloyd then reveals that he has looked over her research records many times. He knows her full name, Wisteria Elaine Rafferty. He admits he has heard stories about her but acknowledges that no one truly knows the answer to why she became a guardian. He asks if she did it for the person she loved. Elaine remains silent, her pain evident. She finally speaks, saying there is no need to answer, as she is talking about a pain that has long since faded. Lloyd, frustrated by her evasiveness, grabs her shoulders. He tells her he is sick of hopes and assumptions that won't come true. He demands she stop saying things she can't do. He pulls her into a tight embrace, his desperation palpable. He tells her that he doesn't want to hurt her, but he needs to know the answer. He asks if there is anyone who can drive the man she loved mad. Elaine, overwhelmed, tries to push him away, reminding him of his duty to the princess. Lloyd dismisses her concerns about the princess, stating he doesn't care about incurring her displeasure. He reveals a shocking truth. His aim is to take Saltus from Elaine. He explains that he could have done it even without becoming the sword's master. He admits that he wants to know more about her, Wisteria Elaine, not just as a guardian or a master, but as a person. He challenges her to a duel of sorts, not with swords, but with honesty. He wants to know what torments her. Elaine, tears streaming down her face, tries to push him away, claiming she is alone and that it doesn't matter. But Lloyd refuses to let go. He tells her that he wants to know everything about her, that he will teach her magic, give her knowledge of the land, anything she wants, except for Saltus. He asks what she wants in exchange for Saltus. Elaine, her voice trembling, finally admits the truth. She says she doesn't have the means to take her with him right now, but she isn't someone who should be in a place like this. She confesses that she wants him to give up on Salt, her disguise, and return to his world. Lloyd, hearing this, looks at her with a mix of sorrow and determination. He realizes that she has already resigned herself to being left behind. He asks if she wants him to disappear from her sight without touching Saltus. Elaine remains silent, her heart breaking. The chapter ends with Lloyd leaving the cabin, telling her to come back soon as it is getting cold. Elaine, left alone, watches him go, her heart heavy with the knowledge that their relationship is temporary. She acknowledges that the pain in her chest will only last for a moment, a fleeting reminder of the connection they share before they must inevitably part ways. In a sun-drenched memory of a time long past, a young Rosalie rests her chin in her hands, her eyes sparkling with adoration. She sits on a picnic blanket beneath the shade of a large tree, the atmosphere thick with the innocence of childhood. She implores her older sister, Nesama, to sing a song, specifically requesting sunlight filtering through the trees. Wisteria, holding a book, looks down at her sister with a gentle, guarded affection, questioning the sudden request. Rosalie insists, beaming with a smile that rivals the sun, declaring her love for her sister's voice because it is really comforting. The scene dissolves into the present reality of the rustic cabin. Elaine, currently disguised as Salt, hums a soft melody while diligently polishing the holy sword, Saltus. She is lost in the rhythm of the work, her guard completely lowered, believing she is alone. Suddenly, a voice cuts through her reverie. Lloyd stands behind her, towel around his neck, remarking on her carefree nature. Elaine jolts, nearly dropping her cleaning cloth. She spins around, flustered, demanding to know why he is there, as he was supposed to be in the bath. Lloyd casually replies that he is finished, teasing her for letting her guard down just because he is the one present. Elaine flushes, embarrassed at being caught singing. She attempts to retreat into silence, claiming she is done, but Lloyd presses the matter. He leans against the wooden pillar, his expression softening into genuine praise. He tells her that it is a shame she stopped, as he found the music refreshing. He compliments her explicitly, stating she has a nice, comforting voice, echoing the words of her sister from the past. Elaine, unable to accept the compliment at face value, assumes he is mocking her or merely offering empty flattery. She retorts that she won't sing anymore. It, however, shifts the dynamic. He looks at her with a steady gaze, suggesting that if she finds it embarrassing to be the only one heard, perhaps the situation requires a trade. Elaine, trying to deflect the awkwardness, suggests that if it is him, he must be good at singing too. She asks, somewhat challengingly, if he wants to perform. Lloyd's expression turns unreadable, a mix of seriousness and hesitation that throws Elaine off balance. He asks, "Do you really want to hear?" Elaine freezes, her mind racing. She cannot decipher his blunt expression. She wonders if he is genuinely embarrassed, or if perhaps he is terrible at singing and this is a warning. Caught between curiosity and the absurdity of the moment, the air hangs heavy with the potential of Lloyd's hidden talent, or lack thereof. The narrative briefly shifts to a metadimensional record documenting the creation of the audio logs, drama CD, for this world. The observer, Yamori Maki, recounts the 2-day recording session where the voices of the characters were forged. The process is described as rigorous: test, confirmation, and finally, production. A specific point of contention arises regarding the pronunciation of the house name. It is established as ruining, not ruining. On the first day, the voice of Lloyd, portrayed by Miyazayu, manifests. The observer notes that his voice exudes elegance while remaining calm, possessing an Eichmann quality that is dazzling even in audio form. Following him, the voice of Saltus, Hamada Kenji, brings a dynamic range, shifting from deep, serious tones that induce goosebumps to fast-paced, rapid-fire comedy that incites laughter. The second day introduces the voice of Wisteria, Fairuz AI. Her performance is hailed as so cool, perfectly capturing the gap between her dignified, guardian mode and her refined, lady mode, a tolerance for role-switching that amazes the observers. The cast expands to include Bright, Kasama Jun, whose voice is so dazzling that even his pretentious lines are forgiven, and Benjamin, Nishiyama Kotaro, whose gentle atmosphere emits minus ions, making him the ideal colleague. The record concludes with a note on the meticulous attention to detail, urging listeners to pay attention to the accents unique to this world and to enjoy the mysterious aura of the person depicted on the jacket cover. The narrative opens within the hazy, monochrome confines of a troubled dream, where a young woman with braided hair listens intently to the worries of her sister, Rosalie. Rosalie sits stiffly on a chair, her face obscured by the fog of memory, confessing that she suffered a nightmare where her beloved older sister, Wis, disappeared into a terrifying void. Wisteria smiles gently in this fabrication, reassuring Rosalie that she remains right there beside her, dismissing the fear as nothing more than a bad dream. However, the atmosphere curdles instantly. Rosalie's expression shifts from vulnerability to accusation, her eyes wide and frantic as she claims that in the dream, Wisteria went to that place and never returned. The dreamscape fractures into jagged shards of rejection and societal pressure. Wisteria watches a memory play out where high society gossips whisper behind fans, lamenting that the flawless Lady Rosalie adores a sister who wastes her life on strange research instead of becoming a star of society. The whispers grow cruel, branding Wisteria as the complete opposite of her perfect sister. The vision shifts to a younger Rosalie standing in a garden, rejecting Wisteria's influence, declaring she cannot be like her sister because everyone is worried about her. The verbal assault culminates in a devastating rejection where Rosalie, flanked by sneering noblewomen, turns her back on Wisteria, claiming that Wisteria's bad reputation is troubleshooting her own standing. As Wisteria reaches out toward the retreating figure of her sister, the vision shatters completely, the glass of the memory breaking apart to reveal a bleak reality. Wisteria stands in the present, clad in mourning black, staring down at a tombstone engraved with the name, Wisteria Elaine Rafferty, age 20. The cold wind of the graveyard brushes past her as she recalls the chaotic aftermath of the accident involving miasma. Memories flood back of Rosalie crying out, accusing others of lying about Wisteria's location, and the subsequent memory loss she suffered due to the trauma of the incident. A man with glasses explains that the terrible nature of the accident likely caused Rosalie to repress her memories to protect herself from the guilt. Wisteria, standing before her own grave, grips her dress, realizing that in order for her sister to keep living, the persona of Wisteria had to die. She vows to live well on her sister's behalf and to protect Lloyd, taking on the burden of love that her sister could no longer carry. Gasping for air, Wisteria jerks awake in her bed, her hair disheveled and sweat clinging to her skin, the remnants of the nightmare fading slowly. The heavy silence of the room breaks as the scent of something warm and sweet drifts through the air, grounding her senses. She wanders into the kitchen to find Lloyd standing by the stove, the pot bubbling rhythmically. He turns, his hair tied back, and greets her with a casual, "Good morning," seemingly unaffected by the heavy history that weighs on Wisteria. She accepts the breakfast he prepared, thanking him, and internally observes that he behaves as if nothing traumatic has occurred, maintaining a facade of normalcy that she finds both comforting and disorienting. As they sit at the wooden table, Wisteria reflects that she feels no reluctance living with Lloyd, having grown accustomed to his presence. Lloyd, however, breaks her train of thought by strapping on his sword, questioning if she intends to go out patrolling alone again. He insists on accompanying her, arguing that splitting up the patrol would be more efficient, but his tone betrays a deeper protectiveness. He leans in close, his hand reaching out to brush near her face, noting with a sharp gaze that she hasn't been sleeping well. He warns her that even slight carelessness due to fatigue could lead to a critical situation. Then, with a disarming smile, he drops a bombshell suggestion. Should we get in bed together? Wisteria freezes, her mind screeching to a halt at the sheer audacity of the question. Salt, the sentient sword resting nearby, immediately chimes in, mocking Lloyd's vocabulary and calling him a brat for such a suggestion. Wisteria's internal monologue screams that just imagining such a scenario is hell, her face flushing crimson. She stammers, asking if he is joking, but Lloyd's expression remains unreadable, prompting him to ask if she simply isn't used to such intimacy. He leans in closer, invading her personal space, and asks if she wishes to sleep together, his eyes narrowing with a predator's focus. Wisteria recoils, interpreting his statement as him treating her like a child who needs comfort, which insults her dignity as his master. Salt interrupts the escalating tension, telepathically noting that unfortunately, many in the past were pleased by Lloyd's advances. Wisteria snaps at the sword, calling it immoral, but the implication sinks in deeply. She realizes with a jolt that Lloyd, unlike the chaste bright she once knew, likely has experience with the opposite sex. The thought that Lloyd attracted women just as bright once did settles heavily in her stomach, creating an unsettling feeling she cannot quite name. She attempts to rationalize her discomfort, telling herself she assumed Lloyd was the same as her, but realizes she has been viewing him through the lens of a teacher seeing a pupil. He grew into an adult before she realized it, and she wonders if the gnawing feeling in her chest is simply loneliness at seeing him become independent. Salt, sensing her inner turmoil, sharply rebukes her. "Don't show your weakness," the sword warns, its voice cutting through her emotional confusion. It points out that she looks pathetic looking at Lloyd that way, cautioning her that relying on the child she is supposed to protect is the height of folly. Wisteria concedes the point, acknowledging that she should have laughed off Lloyd's suggestion maturely instead of reacting so visibly. She scolds herself for letting Lloyd see only her pathetic side, resolving to reflect on her actions. The scene shifts to the outdoors, where the two walk through a rocky landscape. Wisteria, regaining her composure, decides to give Lloyd a word of advice regarding his combat style. However, Salt's earlier warning echoes in her mind. A flashback overtakes her thoughts, recalling a pathetic defeat she suffered recently. In the memory, Salt had warned her strictly, "Don't teach that boy all your skills." The sword advised her to leave at least one technique unknown to him, a means of self-defense to neutralize him should he ever turn against her. Back in the present, Wisteria grips the hilt of her sword, her expression darkening. She admits to herself that she has become complacent, letting her guard down too much around Lloyd. The tactical reality sets in. If it comes down to it, brute force will not work, she would be beaten down. She calculates the grim possibility that she might have to fight Lloyd one day, and the realization strikes her that without a secret alternative, she would lose. As she looks at his back, a seed of doubt takes root. She questions how she should deal with Lloyd if that day comes, and deeper still, she realizes she doesn't even want to fight him anymore. Wisteria glances aside, her expression tightened by a lingering, unspoken tension. She and Lloyd traverse a monochrome void, their bodies suspended in the air as they travel toward a distant objective. The wind whips past them, carrying the silence that has settled between master and apprentice, a silence that Wisteria notes was not present before. Lloyd, breaking the quiet with a casual determination, remarks that he will accompany her to the great dragon tree rather than waiting for her return, a statement that marks a subtle shift in his autonomy. Upon landing on the desolate, cracked earth, they stand before the twisted, skeletal remains of a massive tree. Wisteria's attention snaps to the trunk, where clusters of small, floating creatures adhere to the wood. She identifies them as black jellyfish, a species she knows to be typically docile. However, their behavior disturbs her. They scrape at the bark of the great dragon tree, consuming chips of it as a staple food. She questions whether this parasitic feeding will affect the tree's activation, her mind racing through the ecological implications of their presence. Suddenly, she reassures him that her constitution was confirmed during that very timeline, implying she is biologically different from the humans he saw die. She instructs him to hold out his hand, intending to clean his equipment as well. The mood shifts into awkward intimacy. Wisteria moves to Lloyd, instructing him to sit so she can access his gear. She realizes the necklace he wears has sucked in the most miasma because the mouth is the easiest entry point for the toxin. She leans in, her face inches from his neck, and places her lips on the metal chain resting against his nape. The sensation of her lips grazing his skin sends a jolt through Lloyd. He freezes, his eyes widening. Wisteria pulls back, thanking him, and casually mentions she will wash the item before returning it. Lloyd, flustered and blushing, stammers, asking if she drooled on it, his composure completely shattered. Wisteria, missing the romantic tension entirely, interprets his reaction as disgust, thinking he finds her action unclean. Salt watches the exchange with amusement. He telepathically chides Lloyd, calling him a fool for his reaction, while simultaneously marveling at Wisteria's density. He notes that Wisteria is quite the child for her age, completely oblivious to the effect she has on her apprentice. As Lloyd recovers, clutching his chest, Wisteria mentally calculates the time remaining, noting that it will be another month of this arrangement. Lloyd stands amidst the desolate, cracked earth of the land before dawn, the twisted roots of the great dragon tree looming behind him like the skeletal fingers of a dead giant. He holds the holy sword, Saltus, upright before his face, his expression dark and turbulent. The sentient blade vibrates with disapproval, its voice cutting into Lloyd's mind to declare his current state no good. Saltus lectures the young man, instructing him to cut off his useless anger and discontent, for a swordsman must face himself before he can hope to face an enemy. The holy sword warns him that his chaotic state of mind reflects directly onto the blade, dulling its potential. Saltus presses the interrogation, demanding to know why Lloyd refused to choose his master, Wisteria, as his true master during the pact. The sword lists the criteria for selection: martial arts, magic, or a sound mind and body, noting that many gifted individuals stood before him, yet he chose no one. Lloyd turns his back to the weapon, his posture stiff with defiance, asking what meaning exists in answering such frivolous words with mere logic. He attempts to dismiss the line of questioning, but Saltus perceives this as an attempt to run away from the truth. The sword mocks Lloyd's silence, asking if he plans to outwit Elaine, Wisteria, to become the sword's master through sheer talent and a noble mind alone, asserting that such traits are insufficient. Lloyd's patience snaps. He demands to know what ability he supposedly lacks. Saltus scoffs at the boy's insolence, reminding Lloyd that he answers only on a whim and out of mercy, for Lloyd is not his master. The sword twists the knife of truth deeper, reminding Lloyd that he has completely forgotten whose power keeps Wisteria alive in this miasma-choked wasteland. Saltus forces Lloyd to confront the reality of who drove her to this place, and in whose place she currently suffers. Lloyd's hand crushes into a fist at his side, the leather of his belt creaking under the strain. He acknowledges the heavy truth: it wasn't him who drove her here, but she depends on him now. He whispers that she believes in his words so implicitly that she harbors no doubts, a trust that burdens him as much as it sustains him. Saltus continues his ruthless psychological dissection, stating that while Wisteria lives because of the sword's power, she once actively sought a way to return to the other side. The sword reveals that she gave up when she couldn't find a path, despite Lloyd telling her there was no way to open the gate from here. However, Saltus drops a devastating revelation: a possibility still existed. A power so great it is passed down as legend could have opened a gate. Lloyd freezes, asking if Wisteria wished that of him. He realizes he made a grave miscalculation. He thought he was smart, that he understood the situation, but he overestimated his own role. He believed he could be her savior, the one to pull her from the darkness, but instead, his presence merely sealed her fate in this world. He understands now that to Wisteria he is an unwelcome visitor, a living reminder of the home she lost and the return she sacrificed. If only he hadn't come, she might not be tormented by the hope of a home she can no longer reach. Meanwhile, inside the rustic cabin, Wisteria stirs from a deep sleep, the remnants of a dream fading slowly. She recalls an image of Coral, a creature she thought was a hallucination. Rising from her bed, she opens the heavy wooden door to the gray morning light. At the base of a nearby tree, she discovers a small pile of nuts and berries, a distinct offering. She realizes with a start that Coral is not an illusion. The creature left these as a greeting. She reflects on the nature of the beast she saw, a wolf-like creature that should belong to a pack, yet wanders alone, not unlike herself. The realization that this solitary creature is watching over her brings a strange comfort. Lloyd returns to the cabin, his shirt clinging to his frame with sweat, claiming he was merely stretching. Wisteria observes him, noting internally that Lloyd never neglects his training, a discipline she admires. Lloyd, attempting to shake off the dark conversation with Saltus, shifts his focus entirely to Wisteria's well-being. He asks to check her equipment, worried that the miasma might be affecting her again. Seeing her standing safe, he opens his arms and offers her a hug, framing it as a return for her earlier care of him. Wisteria flushes, caught off guard by the gesture, but allows it, thinking her apprentice is simply a worrywart. Lloyd holds her, his expression softening into a melancholy affection, whispering that he wouldn't mind doing even more if she desired it, a confession that flies completely over Wisteria's head. The conversation shifts to the origin of the protective equipment. Wisteria notes the high quality and asks where it was made. Lloyd reveals it was designed by Benjamin Labra, the director of the Magic Administration Institute's 4th Research Institute. Wisteria recognizes the name immediately, asking if Mr. Labra is well. Lloyd confirms he is in good health, but internally he hides the grim political reality surrounding the man. Far away in the civilized world, within the opulent but stressful halls of the Institute, Benjamin Labra sits exhausted. His subordinates urge him to rest, noting he has been berated by nobles incessantly. The research regarding the land before dawn has been taken over by a more prestigious institute, yet when complications arise, the high-end mighty nobles push the responsibility and blame back onto Labra. His colleagues lament that if the ruining heir, Lloyd, returns safely, the prestigious institute will claim the achievement, but if he dies, Labra will take the fall. They discuss Labra's lack of ambition, noting that his former colleagues have all been promoted or moved to better positions, leaving him behind because he refuses to cling to power or status. One researcher muses that Labra likely stayed to remain at the forefront of the land before dawn research, even if it meant stagnation in his career. Labra, rubbing his tired eyes, silently wonders if that person is still alive, his loyalty to Wisteria anchoring him to his thankless position. Back in the land before dawn, the atmosphere shifts from domestic quiet to ominous foreboding. Deep within the twisted, ancient wood of the great dragon tree, a sound begins to resonate. Thump, thump. A heavy, rhythmic heartbeat echoes from the tree, signaling a mysterious and powerful awakening that neither Lloyd nor Wisteria has yet detected. Lloyd's question pierces the silence of the monochrome void, asking why Wisteria involved herself in the research of the land before dawn. The inquiry drags Wisteria into a sharp recollection, pulling her mind back to the desolate battlefields of her past. She recalls standing amidst the twisted roots of a great dragon tree, her breath rugged as she obliterates a swarm of giant, scorpion-like insects with a single, devastating strike. In the memory, she questions the meaning of such endless combat, her sword, Saltus, warning her against optimism even as she unleashes the celestial bow technique to annihilate the threat. The memory shifts to a specific botanical anomaly. Wisteria remembers noticing strange sprouts near the base of the dragon tree. Saltus had suggested they were merely imitation dandelions, but Wisteria, with a warrior's intuition, identified them as something far more sinister, the snake vine, a parasitic plant she had rarely seen sprout. A phantom sensation of being cut slices through her mind, a premonition of danger that she had brushed aside at the time, a mistake that now weighs heavily on her conscience. Back in the present reality of the rustic cabin, Lloyd returns from his patrol, masking his exhaustion with a casual greeting. He denies being hurt, claiming he merely drove away a horde of demons that had been rampaging around a great dragon tree, a situation suspiciously similar to Wisteria's recollection. He places a worn record book on the wooden table, the heavy thud drawing Wisteria's attention. The book contains detailed logs of the great dragon trees and demon activities, arranged chronologically. Lloyd points to a specific entry from 15 years ago, the 10th day of the 3rd month. He notes that a swarm of demons had become strangely excited near a yellow great dragon tree. Wisteria freezes, realizing the date aligns perfectly with a catastrophic event on the other side, her original world. Lloyd continues to read, his voice steady but relentless, listing incidents where snake vines were found entangling red and blue dragon trees, coinciding with demon frenzies. The horrific mechanic of the ecosystem is laid bare. The snake vine is a parasite that forces the great dragon tree to secrete excessive miasma. This concentrated toxin causes demons to mutate, gain strength, and eventually triggers a mass transference, a teleportation event that sends the monsters to another world. Wisteria turns pale as Lloyd forces her to confront the reality of the incident 15 years ago. The royal army had been dispatched to quell a massive outbreak, but they failed to contain it. The resolution was not victory, but displacement. Most of the demons were transferred to Wisteria's world, causing unprecedented death and destruction there. Wisteria trembles, the guilt of a survivor and a failure crushing her. She confesses that she had been slow to act back then, paralyzed by fear and the isolation of fighting alone in a foreign land. She admits that she lacked the heroic resolve to fight for the sake of others, revealing her deep-seated belief that she is unworthy of being a master. She feels that her hesitation allowed the tragedy to spill over into her home, failing to protect the people she loved. Lloyd, however, refuses to let her wallow in self-pity. He slams the record book shut, declaring that if she had simply run away, these records of her battles would not exist. He argues that her reasons for fighting, even if they were merely to distract herself from thinking, were valid. He reveals the conclusion reached by the researchers, including Benjamin Labra. Since Wisteria became the Guardian, demonic appearances have decreased, and the miasma concentration has stabilized. He steps closer, wiping a tear from her cheek with a gentle, calloused hand. He reframes her entire existence in this desolate land not as a penance, but as a successful guardianship. He asserts that by protecting the great dragon tree and suppressing the demons here, she prevented further transference events. Wisteria looks up at him, her eyes widening as the weight of his words settles in. She realizes that her actions, born of escapism and survival, had a tangible impact. She wonders if Lloyd, standing before her as a young man who is painfully nostalgic yet undeniably present, is part of what she managed to protect. The thought that her struggle saved him brings a wash of relief, finally allowing her to accept his comfort.